The voice hadn't finished resounding out in the air when a handsome young man who wore feathered clothes with broad sleeves and a loose girdle walked slowly into the hall with a jade fan that had golden designs in his hand. His chin was lifted up high while a smile had curled up on the corners of his mouth, and he carried a haughty and frivolous aura. His expression was rather relaxed, and he didn't seem as if he'd walked into a hall in the core of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, but seemed like he'd arrived at his own backyard instead. There was a group of young men and women following behind the young man. All of them were laughing and noisy, had frivolous bearings, and they didn't have the slightest trace of an intention to restrain themselves. As they looked at the young man who held the jade fan leading the group of young men and young women in, the sect leader and elder Lai Peng both frowned, yet they didn't say anything. Both of them just sent a voice transmission to remind Xianxia that he should endure temporarily and not make any rash moves because a little impatience may spoil everything. Xianxia similarly noticed this group of people, and he determined with a sweep of his gaze that these fellows were all descendants of immortals like Nan Shouchong, Wan Renyi, and the others, and even though the immortal energy around their bodies was surging, their strengths were only at the earthly immortal realm. The killing intent in his heart grew deeper when he saw this, and he was truly unable to imagine why one of the 10 great immortal sects, the 9 Radiant Sword sect, would be helpless against these profligate disciples from the immortal dimension. It was even to the extent that even the sect master seemed to be swallowing insult and humiliation. "You're Xianxia." The young man in the lead swept his gaze through the surroundings before it descended onto Xianxia, and his eyes lit up as if he'd noticed his prey. "Young Master Mei, you have a good eye. This is precisely the most outstanding disciple in the younger generation of my 9 Radiant Sword sect. Now, he has already advanced to become an elder, and he wields the position of master of the West Radiance Peak." Before Xianxia could speak, Lai Peng had already laughed heartily while introducing. "Xianxia, this is Mei Qingyuan from the Immortal Dimension's 9 Radiance Sword sect. Young Master Mei is young and promising, and he possesses a brilliant reputation in the Immortal Dimension. As for those young men and young women behind Mei Qingyuan, Lai Peng didn't introduce them. Obviously, the status of these others was inferior to Mei Qingyuan. "Humph! Lai Peng, you geezer. Did this young master ask you a question?" Mei Qingyuan's face sank abruptly as he glanced at Lai Peng with displeasure, and he seemed to be blaming Lai Peng for speaking out of turn. Lai Peng's expression froze, and he was slightly embarrassed, but he still forcefully endured it in the end. Those young men and young women roared with laughter when they saw this, and they had mocking expressions while a wisp of complacency suffused Mei Qingyuan's face. If it was the immortal dimension, they would naturally not be so unbridled to the point of not taking an elder of a sect seriously. But this was the mortal dimension, so how could they possibly have any scruples? It wasn't just that. Their originally overbearing and arrogant characters had become even more unbridled upon arriving at the mortal dimension. After all is said and done, this was actually a common mentality of everyone from the immortal dimension. They took the mortal dimension to be a lowly plane that wasn't worth mentioning. But the display of Mei Qingyuan and the others was just even more haughty. Xianxia's brows knit even more tightly when he saw Lai Peng being humiliated, and he was almost unable to restrain the killing intent in his heart. "Bastard! Are you deaf? Didn't senior brother Mei ask you a question? Quickly kneel down and answer him obediently." Meanwhile, a thin and tall young man amongst those young men and young women glanced over and saw Xianxia had actually remained indifferent. So he berated right away in a cold voice, and his tone was arrogant to the point it seemed like he was teaching his grandson a lesson. "Senior brother Gao, this little fellow has obviously been terrified to the point of being stunned. Yet you're still blaming him. You're really too bad." A young woman with a pretty appearance spoke with a tender voice, yet her words were sarcastic and ridiculing to the extreme. "Ha ha! Could it be that junior sister Zhu longs for love and you've taken a fancy to this little fellow? Why are you siding with him? I'm really jealous. This won't do. I have to terrify him to the point he pisses himself, and then I'll see if you still speak up for him." Senior brother Gao roared with laughter once again. He and that junior sister Zhu had actually used Xianxia's pretext to tease each other like lovers under the gazes of everyone present, and they were arrogant and haughty to the extreme. "Eh! You're actually still standing there without moving. Could it be that you took this young master's words as a gust of wind that blew past your ears? Kneel. Senior Brother Gao's face sank when he saw Chun, she still remaining indifferent, and he walked forward with a large stride before raising his leg and kicking at Xianxi's knee. He actually made a move directly with the intention of forcing Xianxi to kneel. Moreover, this kick was swift and ferocious, and it was like a whip that swept out rather swiftly, ruthlessly, and accurately. It was obviously not an empty show of strength, and if it were to hit, then even a top-grade heaven-rank magic treasure would be shattered. The other young men and young women revealed excited expressions when they saw this, and they seemed as if they were going to watch a good show. Bang! However, to their disappointment, Senior Brother Gao's leg hadn't even approached Xianxi when it was directly dealt with by a flick of a sleeve of the sect master that had noticed the situation was bad since the beginning. Xianxi was slightly disappointed. He was even prepared to directly break this bastard's leg and crush him with a single move before thinking about anything else. Unfortunately, when Huading had stopped this halfway, "Old man 1. You actually dared to stop this young master." Senior Brother Gao's expression sank when his attack didn't succeed, and he directly pointed at Wen Huading while cursing with an attitude that was simply haughty to the limit. At this moment, the face of Wen Huading that was usually warm and poised couldn't help but darken while the veins on his forehead bulged. But he restrained himself in the end and said, "Young Master Gao, calm your rage. We're all family, so there's no reason to fight each other, right? Fuck off. Who's from the same family as you? You're just a tiny sect master from the mortal dimension. Are you even worthy to compare yourself with this young master? Move aside. Don't hope of continuing to be the sect master if you dare to continue obstructing me." The more when Huading acted in this way, the more arrogant it made that Senior Brother Gao become, and he cursed in an even more unbridled manner. The killing intent that had accumulated in Xianxi's heart since a long time ago couldn't be restrained any longer when he heard this, and he said, "Sect Master, Elder Lai Peng, both of you step back for now. This matter arose because of me, so allow me to bear the responsibility for it myself." His low and deep voice carried an indisputable feeling, causing Wen Huading and Lai Peng's expression to go grim when they heard this. They wanted to restrain him, but when they saw Xianxi's resolute gaze, they restrained themselves for some unknown reason. Both of them sighed in their hearts. If it was in terms of rage, theirs was greater than Xianxi. But for the sake of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, they could only endure, and if it wasn't for this, with their nature, they would have killed these bastards from the immortal dimension a long time ago. But even if they decided to stand and watch from the sidelines, their mood became even heavier. "Oh, I didn't notice that you have some backbone. But no matter how unyielding you are, when you're before this young master, you have to kneel down obediently for this young master and apologize for your offense." That Senior Brother Gao sized Xianxi up from top to bottom, and then he kicked once more. The move was the same and without the slightest change, and this obviously showed how arrogant he was. It seemed as if he'd already confirmed that Xianxi would utterly not dare to fight back. Crack! However, to his surprise, he felt something flash before his eyes at the moment he lifted his leg, and then a hand that was like an iron thong had grabbed tightly onto his ankle before twisting fiercely. The bone in his leg was directly broken, and it emitted a clear and sharp sound of bones breaking. At this moment, it wasn't just Mei Qingyuan and the others that hadn't expected this. Even when Huading and Lai Peng didn't dare believe their eyes. Xianxi had actually moved so resolutely and directly crippled his right leg. Instantly, Senior Brother Gao felt pain to the point tears almost flowed from his eyes, and he emitted an extremely miserable and sharp cry. "Bastard! You actually dared to fight back. You're courting death." As he spoke, his figure suddenly stabilized as his left leg swung out abruptly. It was like an axe that tore through the sky and carried peerlessly fierce immortal energy as it struck down ferociously at Xianxi. Xianxi's expression was icy cold. Before the attack could even approach him, he suddenly exerted force with his right leg and dragged Senior Brother Gao's crippled right leg, and then his wrist twisted as he raised Senior Brother Gao up like a sandbag and smashed Senior Brother Gao fiercely on the ground. Pooh! Senior Brother Gao's entire body was smashed on the ground. His features were warped while blood sprayed from his nose and mouth, and a wave of cracking sounded out throughout his body. Countless bones within his body had broken, causing him to let out endless miserable howls like a dying dog. The ground that was constructed from fine steel and rock had a large hole smashed open on it, and it obviously showed how enormous the force of Xianxi's strike was. Bastard! You're courting death. This young master will slaughter your entire family. I won't leave a soul alive. Senior Brother Gao's expression was savage as he roared with a grim voice like a mad devil. As soon as these words were spoken, a wisp of a sharp light that was icy cold to the extreme flashed abruptly in Xianxi's eyes. These words had touched his bottom line, and it completely aroused the killing intent in him. Right at this moment, Mei Qingyuan and the others reacted to what had happened, and they cried out with curses while they charged forward with the intention of rescuing Senior Brother Gao. Earlier, they had utterly not imagined that Xianxi would actually dare to make a move against them. After all, as far as they were concerned, he was merely a tiny ant at the nether transformation realm from the mortal dimension. So besides enduring silently, would anyone dare resist in the slightest when facing all of them? It was precisely because of this sort of sense of superiority that they would be stunned and not assist Senior Brother Gao in time when they saw Xianxi bash Senior Brother Gao to such an extent in a few moves. At this moment, when they recovered from their shock, how could they endure any longer? A tiny ant had actually dared to offend his superiors and made a move to injure their companion. This was absolutely someone that was tired of living. Bang! In the next instant, the three people that charged over in the front had already executed various formidable Dao arts, and their ruthless moves struck at Xianxi from different directions. Even though they were arrogant, the cultivations of these profligate disciples from the immortal dimension weren't weak, and all of them were at the earthly immortal realm. In the mortal dimension, their cultivations were sufficient to look down upon most cultivators. Unfortunately, they encountered Xianxi this time. Slap! 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 3 clear and resounding slaps sounded out. The 3 of them approached swiftly and left swiftly as well. They were instantly slapped flying by Xianxi, causing blood to spray from their noses and mouths while many of their teeth had been struck off, and they fell to the ground and wailed endlessly. When Huiding and Lai Peng were both terrified. When did Xianxi's strength become so formidable? Dealing with these profligate disciples at the earthly immortal realm is simply as easy as sweeping away dry leaves for him. Only Liang Bing had a calm expression because she'd witnessed Xianxi teaching Nan Xiuchong, Wan Renyi, and the others a lesson in the talisman dimension. Comparatively speaking, these bastards before her were inferior in cultivation to Nan Xiuchong and the others, so it would be weird if Xianxi was unable to deal with them. How audacious! How audacious indeed! Mei Qingyuan's features became livid and icy cold to the extreme as he said, "Little fellow, you've completely infuriated this young master. No matter who comes today, they'll be unable to save you. Now, I'll give you a final chance to atone for your crimes. Take your own life. Atone for his crimes with death." The brows of Wen Huiding and Lai Peng trembled, and they were furious because of Mei Qingyuan's arrogance and worried about Xianxi's future. Mei Qingyuan and the others were nothing. The key was that were a few great figures from the immortal dimension that had come along with them, and they were discussing matters with the 3 sages of 9 radiance in the depths of Divine Radiance Peak, and once they were alarmed, the consequences would be unimaginable. The 3 sages of 9 radiance were the top 3 figures amongst the seniors that lived in seclusion within the 9 radiant sword sect, and they were respectively Fei Ling, Feng Ting, and Deng Chun. It wasn't exaggerated to say that the existence of these 3 seniors was like a pillar that held up the sky, and they guarded the 9 radiant sword sect and made it so that no one dared to come offend the sect. Even the sect master and all those other earthly immortal realm experts that lived in seclusion were respectful, reverent, and addressed themselves as juniors before these 3 seniors. Presently, these great figures that had descended from the immortal dimension were able to discuss matters with the 3 sages of 9 radiance, whereas even the sect master status was insufficient to participate in it. Thus, it obviously displayed how lofty the status of these great figures was. On the other hand, when Xianxi heard that Mei Qingyuan wanted him to die to atone for his crimes, Xianxi's eyes narrowed while cold lights flashed within, and he lightly spat out a few words. The death of trash like all of you is nothing to be regretted. Since it's like that, then die. Mei Qingyuan's expression was extremely gloomy, and with a wave of his hand, all the young men and young women by his side moved out. Kill! Kill this ant. No matter who it is, if someone dares to obstruct me today, then that person will be a sworn enemy of this young master. Rumble! Instantly, the entire hall was filled with peerlessly vast immortal energy. Tao arts rumbles while magic treasures whistled, and if it wasn't for the protection of the grand formation within the hall, merely this moment was sufficient to flatten the entire true martial peak. Amidst this chaos, Xianxia executed the wings of disruption, and he was like a flowing ray of light that flickered repeatedly in space, and he moved about indeterminately like a ghost. Bang! A clear bang resounded out. A young man was caught off guard, causing his neck to be directly grabbed by a hand that arrived abruptly, and then he was lifted up like a chick before being smashed into the ground. An enormous hole was smashed open by his body, causing him to bleed from all 7 apertures while his entire body convulsed before he fainted. Senior Brother Wang. The nearby junior sister Zhu let out a sharp cry of shock and fury when she saw this, and then her sleeves fluttered as they struck down at Xianxia's neck like 2 venomous dragons. But before her attack could approach him, an enormous and thick fist that was coiled by the violent glow of lightning whistled over and rapidly enlarged within her eyes. Bang! Her pretty face was instantly struck to the point it sunk down, and if it wasn't for her dodging in time, merely this punch was sufficient to smash her head apart. But even then, after she suffered this strike, her vision went black while she was blasted flying like a kite that had its string cut, and she smashed fiercely onto the door of the hall before fainting. H! In next to no time, numerous miserable and shrill cries sounded out from time to time, and it vibrated through the hall and caused the hall to seem like it was purgatory. At this moment, the dense and seething killing intent in Xianxia's heart had completely erupted, and he was like a god of devils that killed resolutely. Everywhere he passed, no one was capable of bearing the brunt of his might. With his current combat strength, it was sufficient to annihilate an expert at the 5th level of the earthly immortal realm. So when he faced these profligate disciples from the immortal dimension that were at most at the 4th level of the earthly immortal realm, it was simply as if he was sweeping through dried leaves, and he was all-powerful and seemed unstoppable. Numerous disciples had gathered outside the hall since an unknown moment in time. Shockingly, Wei, Long Jinbei, Chun Langia, Luo Qianrong, and the other core seed disciples were amongst these disciples. Obviously, they'd come after hearing the news. Nice! I've already had enough of these bastards in these past few days. If it wasn't for my strength being insufficient, I would have surely bashed these bastards to the point of crying for their mother and father just like Xianxia. Long Jinbei clenched his fists as he watched Xianxia revealed invincible martial prowess and sweep through everyone in the surroundings. He was extremely excited in his heart as well, and he truly wished for nothing more than to howl up into the sky. Since these profligate disciples from the immortal dimension arrived at the 9 Radiant Sword Sect, the entire 9 Radiant Sword Sect was covered in a foul atmosphere because of them, and it just so happened that the higher-ups paid no attention to this, causing them to be extremely aggrieved in their hearts. Originally, they were extremely worried when they heard Xianxia had returned today. After all, everyone in the sect knew that Mei Qingyuan had taken Xianxia to be an enemy because of Shuyan, and if Xianxia returned, Xianxia would probably meet with calamity. But the scenes before their eyes now clearly told them that Xianxia didn't meet with calamity, and it was these profligate disciples from the immortal dimension that had met with calamity instead. So how could they who'd been aggrieved for so long not be excited? I never expected that after a short 1 year of not seeing each other, Xianxia's strength has actually arrived at such an extent, Chun Langia muttered. Besides exclaiming with admiration, a wisp of a complicated feeling couldn't help but arise in his heart. It's truly difficult to chase after the footsteps of this fellow. It is satisfying, but I'm very worried that Xianxia's situation will become very bad after he did this. And Wei's beautiful brows knit together while her gorgeous face was suffused with a wisp of worry. As core seed disciples, all of them were naturally aware that these profligate disciples from the immortal dimension dared to act in such an unbridled manner because they had something to rely on. not to mention their background and identities. Merely those great figures that had come along with them weren't figures that anyone in the sect dared to offend. If they found out about what had occurred here, then how could those great figures from the immortal dimension possibly let Xianxia off? The excited expressions on the faces of the other disciples gradually faded when they heard this, and then a wisp of worry appeared between their brows. Right, it's satisfying to bash them up, but how will Xianxia deal with the aftermath? But in next to no time, their attention was drawn by a scene that occurred within the hall. In the entire hall, all those profligate disciples from the immortal dimension lay scattered on the ground with swollen faces and bathed in blood while they groaned and howled without end. But most of them had already fainted, and they seemed to be rather miserable. At this moment, Mei Qingyuan was the only person left standing, and his expression was gloomy to the limit. No matter how he racked his brains, he was unable to figure out how a tiny ant at the Nether Transformation Realm was actually able to sweep through a group of earthly immortal realm experts. Such heaven-defying strength caused him to be both shocked and furious, and besides carrying resentment and rage, his gaze at Xianxia even surged with a wisp of fear. Not to mention him, even the sect master and Lai Peng's expressions were strange because a cultivator at the Nether Transformation Realm had put down a group of earthly immortal realm experts like an autumn breeze that swept away fallen leaves. Such a visual impact was simply strong to an unparalleled level, and it caused both of them to be extremely shocked. How did you achieve this?" asked Mei Qingyuan. Even he himself didn't notice that his voice carried a trace of trembling that couldn't be restrained. "Kneel down and beg me, and I'll tell you," said Xianxia calmly. After experiencing this battle, the killing intent in his heart hadn't calmed down, and if it wasn't out of respect for Wen Huiting and Lai Peng, the people that lay on the ground would have perished a long time ago. "Little fellow, do you know the consequences of offending this young master? Don't think that you've so extraordinary just because you can surmount a realm to do battle. If this young master wants to kill you, then no one in this world can save you." Mei Qingyuan was furious when he heard this. As the descendant of a great figure from the immortal dimension, even if he felt slight fear in his heart towards Xianxia's strength, the domineering disposition he'd fostered for many years caused him to be unable to accept someone daring to trample on his dignity. What a joke! Even if you have the status of someone from the immortal dimension, you're just a pile of dog shit. Yet you still dare threaten me? At this moment, Xianxia was overbearing and domineering, and he carried a dignified bearing of supremacy. "You called me dog shit?" Mei Qingyuan was angered to the point his entire body started trembling, and his eyes burned with flames of rage while he gnashed his teeth to the point they almost shattered apart. "I was mistaken, you're worse than dog shit," Xianxia said indifferently. "I forgot to tell you, I just killed a group of trash that felt they were superior because they possess backgrounds from the immortal dimension just like you. If you remain unconvinced, then feel free to try." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone including Wen Huiting and Lai Peng were shocked and felt disbelief. Xianxia actually said that he killed the descendants of immortals in the past? Moreover, it wasn't one but a group? This was too shocking, and they even suspected that Xianxia might be lying. But when everyone recalled everything Xianxia had said and done in these past few years, they were very sure that Xianxia ought to not lie at this moment. When they thought up to here, the gazes everyone shot at Xianxia changed, and they seemed as if they were looking at a freak that couldn't be judged by convention. But Mei Qingyuan didn't know anything about Xianxia, or perhaps he'd overlooked those words, and he only heard the words, "You're worse than dog shit. A tiny ant actually dares to humiliate me like this?" Instantly, his expression turned extremely unsightly while his face seemed savage and warped. Suddenly, his gaze swept out as his hands crossed each other, and then he punched fiercely at Xianxia. Bang! An expanse of a pitch-black veil of night descended, and it was extremely dark as if the day had suddenly been devoured by the might of this fist. Space shattered and collapsed before transforming into an expanse of darkness, a realm of darkness. 9 World Annihilation, Immortal Punishment of Darkness. A terrifying punch spread out and enveloped Xianxia like the night, and it seemed as if it intended to confine Xianxia within a purgatory of darkness and completely suppress him there. This was a terrifying immortal art that had already exceeded the scope of Tao arts. Even though it was executed with Mei Qingyuan's Dao insights and not the energy of the laws, its might was still extremely terrifying. Chen Shi's entire body shook when facing this fist, and then divine light suddenly rumbled and flowed out from his body. It seemed like a scorching sun had arisen from behind him, and it was dazzling, vast, brilliant, and blazing. As soon as it spread out, it torn apart all darkness. Bang! He similarly struck out with a punch that circulated with the profundities of obliteration. It caused rumbling booms that seemed all-powerful, and it completely destroyed the force of Mei Qingyuan's punch. Everyone saw Chen Shi destroy the attack of his opponent with a single punch, and his figure was mighty as he flashed forward, whereas Mei Qingyuan retreated step by step. What a terrifying might! Is this something that a cultivator at the Nether Transformation realm can possess? Blood sprayed out repeatedly from Mei Qingyuan's mouth, and his entire body almost collapsed. The light of darkness, infinite destruction. His ferocity was completely aroused, and he launched his final counterattack because he was utterly unable to accept being defeated by a tiny ant at the Nether Transformation realm. So he went all out, and he converged the strength within his entire body into this strike. Kneel! Chen Shi seemed as if he was taking an idle stroll through a courtyard, and he seemed casual and carefree. He pressed down in the sky with a single hand, causing the space above Mei Qingyuan's head to suddenly start to shrink, collapse, and form into a force that was filled with an aura of boundless obliteration before slowly pressing down onto Mei Qingyuan. The might of this move was so enormous, and the glow of obliteration dazzled as it formed a seal that shook the Mei Qingyuan to the point the true essence defenses on his body crumbled with a bang. Moreover, his expression turned savage while he couldn't refrain from roaring repeatedly. But no matter how he struggled, it was of no use because his knees were crushed by the oppressive force, and he directly kneeled before Chen Shi. He kneeled. Chen Shi is too formidable. Mei Qingyuan was overbearing, arrogant, and haughty because he was a descendant of a great figure from the immortal dimension. Now he was suppressed to the point of kneeling instead. Moreover, it was in front of so many people. Even if he returns to the immortal dimension, he wouldn't be able to raise his head again. Haha! Nice! He thought he can be lawless in the mortal dimension. But he still can't withstand a single strike before Chen Shi. He can properly realize that no matter if he's a mortal or immortal, it's better to keep a low profile. The crowd outside the hall seethed with excitement as all the Core Seed disciples were shocked and satisfied when they saw Chen Shi pressure Mei Qingyuan to the point of kneeling. On the other hand, when Huiding and Lai Peng gasped as well, and they slightly didn't dare believe their eyes. Bastard! Mei Qingyuan's eyes almost split apart, and he was on the verge of going mad as boundless humiliation surged out from the depths of his heart. His face turned purplish-red from his fury, and he roared, "Chen Shi, you're finished. You're completely finished. From today onward, you're the greatest enemy of Mei Qingyuan, and no one in this world can save you. No one." Chen Shi frowned while a wisp of killing intent suffused his eyes. If he was in the talisman dimension, he could kill this bastard freely. But after he returned to the sect, he had to consider too many things, and it caused him to be restrained and hesitant instead. He didn't like this sort of feeling. There was even a moment that he wanted to disregard everything and annihilate all these bastards. After all, it was precisely because of these fellows that an elder of the 9 Radiant Sword sect like him had become an enemy of the sect instead. Moreover, it even implicated everyone from the entire West Radiance Peak. And this had already offended Chen Shi's reverse scale. "Haha! What's wrong, little bastard? Kill me if you have the balls. Come on." Mei Qingyuan's eyes were filled with resentment while his face warped, and he shouted madly with a sharp voice. He'd already decided that once he escaped this situation, he would surely find an opportunity to extract the tendons and tear the skin off this tiny ant before causing this tiny ant to be unable to die nor live. He wanted to repay all the humiliation he received today thousands of times over. Slap! Chen Shi didn't hesitate in the slightest to slap Mei Qingyuan on the face, and Chen Shi hit Mei Qingyuan to the point blood sprayed from his mouth and nose before Chen Shi said indifferently, "Wanna die? It isn't so easy. You. I'm gonna fucking kill you. Kill you." Mei Qingyuan gnashed his teeth with hatred to the point his teeth were on the verge of shattering, and he struggled madly with all his strength. But under Chun Shi's absolute suppression, it was a futile effort in the end. Slap! Another resounding slap sounded out. Shut up! Who gave you the gall to try and forcefully seize people related to me? Chun Shi's expression was calm, yet the force he exerted was rather great, and he slapped Mei Qingyuan to the point Mei Qingyuan's head swelled up like the head of a pig, while Mei Qingyuan emitted sharp cries that sounded like pigs that were being slaughtered. Even when Huiding couldn't bear to continue watching when he saw this scene, and he couldn't help but say, Chun Shi, it's best to know when to stop. The meaning within his words was that this kid had people standing behind him, and if Chun Shi were to offend these people, then it wouldn't be beneficial to Chun Shi. Know when to stop? Impossible! Mei Qingyuan's overbearing arrogance surged up when he heard this, and he cried out in a sharp voice, You too, old man one! You allowed a disciple to humiliate this young master. Your crimes simply deserve death. Now this young master will give you one last chance. Capture Chun Shi and this young master will let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, wait to atone for you crimes for everything that happened today. Slap! Chun Shi slapped Mei Qingyuan once more, causing teeth that were mixed with blood to spray onto the ground. And Mei Qingyuan's head droned while he saw golden stars. When he saw that this bastard had finally understood the situation clearly and shut up obediently, Chun Shi raised his eyes to look at Wen Huiding before he said, Sect Master, I'll bear all responsibility for this matter. You don't have to bother too much about me. Nonsense. Wen Huiding's expression finally became stern as he berated. Remember, even if the sky is pierced open, you're still a disciple of the 9 Radiant Sword Sect. So how could I, a senior, possibly look on indifferently? When he spoke up to hear, his entire body emitted a lofty and arrogant aura. He stopped enduring, stopped hesitating, and stopped worry about gains and losses, and he was filled with the dignity of a ruler. Do you remember what I said when you entered the sect for the first time? Our 9 Radiant Sword Sect is established by the sword, and it stresses upon the sword and heart being as one and forging ahead with spirit. If I lose this spirit, and if I'm even unable to take care of a disciple, then there's no need for this position as sect master. When Huiding stood with his hands behind his back, his figure was tall, his gaze was like a bolt of lightning, and he possessed a majestic and powerful imposing aura. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked, including those disciples that were outside the hall. The gazes of everyone towards Wen Huiding had changed. Their gazes turned to gazes of excitement and reverence, and there was even a cohesive force surging in their hearts. A man is ready to die for his friends. If a sect wanted to stand towering without falling, then it had to be operated like a metal drum from inside and out. Firstly, there was a need for responsibility because there could only be a cohesive force in the sect when the sect was responsible. At this moment, Wen Huiding's words that were filled with spirit had undoubtedly attained this effect. Humph! Huiding, speaking such rash words for the sake of an insignificant disciple? What would others think of our sect? However, right at this moment, a cold grunt suddenly sounded out from outside the hall, and it was like a thunderclap that appeared abruptly and rumbled in the ears of everyone, causing their expressions to go grim. Along with this voice, 3 mighty figures appeared out of thin air in the hall as if they'd teleported here. All of their bodies were coiled with the energy of the laws while their auras were deep like oceans. They were like scorching suns and possessed peerless divine might. This was an old man, a middle-aged man, and a middle-aged woman. At the instant they appeared in the hall, merely the auras they emitted caused the space within the hall to drone and wail, and it seemed like space itself was prostrating itself and respectfully welcoming the arrival of a group of kings. The person that spoke earlier was the old man in Taoist robes. His face was thin, and he had a boundlessly deep gaze and a strand of beard beneath his jaw. Wen Huiding took a deep breath when he saw this old man, and then he bowed with Lai Peng and said, Martial Uncle Fei Ling. Obviously, this person was one of the 3 sages of 9 Radiance, Fei Ling. Shit. It's those 2 great figures from the immortal dimension. At the same time, Lai Peng's voice transmission suddenly entered Chen Shi's ears, and his voice carried a wisp of anxiety. Chen Shi, the middle-aged man, is called Mei Luoxiao, and the woman is called Yu Xianxia. Both of them are supreme and great figures from the immortal dimension that are at the heavenly immortal realm. Especially that Mei Luoxiao, he's Mei Qingyuan's fourth granduncle. You must endure and leave the rest to be dealt with by me and the sect master. Chen Shi's eyes narrowed as he glanced over, and he saw Mei Luoxiao wore green clothes, had a refined appearance, and he seemed like a scholar. But his gaze was ghastly like lightning, and it was suffused with a horrifying sheen. On the other hand, Yu Xianxia was a beautiful woman with thick and beautiful hair that was coiled into a bun. She wore violet-colored dress, had a gorgeous and graceful bearing that seemed to look down upon everything in the world. No wonder Mei Qingyuan and these bastards dare to run wild like this. So it turns out that their reliance is these two heavenly immortals. Chen Shi sneered without end in his heart. He secretly compared these two people with Bing Shitian, and even if he was unwilling to admit it, it was needless to say that even though Mei Luoxiao and Yu Zhongxia's imposing aura was formidable, Chen Shi kept having the feeling that it was unable to compare with Bing Shitian. After all, the Bing Shitian in the mortal dimension was only a clone. Yet merely a clone like this possessed an imposing aura that could compare to two real heavenly immortals. So, Chen Shi had no choice but to suspect exactly how formidable is the cultivation of Bing Shitian's main body. Of course, this was merely his judgment based on their imposing auras on the surface. As for exactly how formidable their strengths were, Chen Shi was unable to estimate it with his current cultivation. Fourth granduncle. Save me. On the other hand, when Ancestor Fei Ling brought Mei Luoxiao and Yu Zhongxia into the hall, Mei Qingyuan, who knelt on the ground, suddenly emitted a loud and miserable cry. Originally, when Mei Luoxiao and Yu Zhongxia arrived here, they instantly noticed everything within the hall, especially when they saw that those people that lay scattered all over the ground was actually those disciples that followed them to descend to the mortal dimension. Their expressions had become gloomy. At this moment, when they saw Mei Qingyuan, who knelt on the ground and had a face that was swollen to the point it seemed like the head of a pig shouting loudly for help, their faces had darkened completely while their eyes were filled with a piercingly cold and ghastly expression. Qingyuan, stand up. Tell me what exactly has happened. Mei Luoxiao spoke with a low voice, and his calm voice revealed unconcealed rage. Actually, there was utterly no need to ask because they could discern who did it with a single glance. But he just needed a reason to vent the rage in his heart. Most importantly, he actually felt slight disbelief. How could a little fellow possibly accomplish this? Fourth granduncle. It was him. He offended his superiors and considered everyone beneath him. Moreover, he even knocked out junior brother Gao and the others. His methods are despicable while his attitude is unbridled to the extreme. You must uphold justice for everyone. Since Mei Luoxiao entered the hall, Mei Qingyuan's spirits were refreshed. But even though he was excited in his heart, he spoke as if he was a resentful wife that had been wronged and abandoned, and he stared resentfully at Chen Shi while gnashing his teeth and speaking. As he spoke, he struggled with the intention of standing and returning to the side of his fourth granduncle. Bang! However, right at this moment, a huge slap struck his face, and it struck to the point his neck almost broke while he emitted a miserable wail and knelt once more on the ground. This slap was truly too ruthless and too quick, and it even exceeded the expectations of everyone present here. It wasn't just Mei Luoxiao and Yu Zhongxia that didn't imagine Chen Shi would dare make a move before them. Even Ancestor Fei Ling, the sect master, and Elder Lai Peng had never expected that Chen Shi would actually act in this way at this moment. Instantly, when Huiding and Lai Peng cried bitterly without end in their hearts, because Chen Shi acting in this way was undoubtedly like pushing himself into a pile of flames. So how could they save the situation? The atmosphere instantly became deathly silent. Only Mei Qingyuan's wails of pain resounded out, and it irritated Mei Luoxiao to the point the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch fiercely. Fellow Taoist Mei. Ancestor Fei Ling frowned and glanced at Chen Shi with slight displeasure before he spoke. There's no need to say anything. However, before he could say anything, he was interrupted with a wave of Mei Luoxiao's hand. His eyes were icy cold like blades as it swept past Wen Huiting, Lai Peng, and the others before finally descending onto Chen Shi, and then he said, "I'm going to take this kid with me today. Do any of you have any objections? Take Chen Shi away?" Wen Huiting frowned when he heard this, and he gazed at Ancestor Fei Ling. He knew that if Chen Shi were to be taken away, then the consequences Chen Shi faced would absolutely be unimaginable. Not only would Chen Shi suffer humiliation, he might even be tormented to death. But Mei Luoxiao had a revered status, and even he was unable to speak, so he could only hope that Ancestor Fei Ling stopped this. Fei Ling pondered deeply for a short moment before sighed. "Fellow Taoist Mei, Chen Shi is the most outstanding disciple of my 9 Radiance Sword sect, and he's a figure that's like a peerless genius. He possesses an extremely high prestige in the sect. If it wasn't unavoidable, he would absolutely not commit acts like this." Before he could finish speaking, Mei Luoxiao interrupted him coldly once more. "Fellow Taoist Fei Ling, it's only a disciple. Could it be that you want to make trouble between us just because of this?" His voice already carried a threatening intent. Meanwhile, Xianxia spoke as well. No matter how good his natural talent is, but his nature is so despicable and unbridled. Such a disciple would sooner or later bring calamity to the 9 Radiant Sword sect. So why not expel him as soon as possible, so as to avoid him bringing calamity to the sect in the future? She had dignified appearance and graceful bearing, but her attitude was extremely blunt. She seemed to have taken Chen Shi to be a calamity, causing Wen Huiting and all the disciples to frown and be extremely displeased. This was simply nonsense, because if it wasn't for these profligate disciples of the immortal dimension being domineering, arrogant, carried out many injustices, even wanting to forcefully seize people related to Chen Shi's on West Radiance Peak, how could they possibly have been bashed by Chen Shi? Not to mention Chen Shi's character was something that was clear to everyone in the 9 Radiant Sword sect, and if he was said to be despicable, then there would be no good person in the world. Obviously, Xianxia was prejudiced towards with Mei Qingyuan and the others, but even if they clearly knew this, and even with Fei Ling's, he could only endure it. Couldn't be helped, Mei Luoxiao and Xianxia were true heavenly immortals, and they were emissaries sent down to the mortal dimension by the 9 Radiant Sword sect in the immortal dimension, so they possessed extremely revered identities, causing him to be unable to offend them. Right? This kid is so despicable. He's simply fiendish. Men Qingyuan knelt on the ground as he cried out with a miserable voice. "Fellow Taoist Fei Ling, indecision leads to trouble. This kid is unbridled and like a vile tumor. So why not hand him over to Brother Mei, because it's better to eliminate him as soon as possible." Xianxia spoke with confidence and composure, and she had an indifferent expression while her words had already given Chen Shi the death sentence. Arguing endlessly while making slanderous charges against others. "I really wonder how a bitch like you cultivated to the heavenly immortal realm." Chen Shi spoke abruptly, and he stared directly at Xianxia while he spoke coldly. Moreover, his tone was calm, yet his words were extremely vicious. Slap! As he spoke, Chen Shi slapped Mei Qingyuan on the face once more. This time, he slapped Mei Qingyuan to the point even Mei Qingyuan's mouth split open while blood covered his face. And then Mei Qingyuan's body started spasming as if he was epileptic and almost fainted. Overbearing. Peerlessly overbearing. Who could have imagined that Chen Shi would actually insult a female heavenly immortal as a bitch under this sort of circumstances? And he even took the opportunity to give Mei Qingyuan a slap? This was simply no different to slapping these 2 heavenly immortals on the face. Instantly, no matter if it was Wen Huiting, Lai Peng, Fei Ling, and the others or the disciples outside the hall, all of them stared with their eyes wide open. Even though they clearly knew that Chen Shi's actions were extremely bad, they had a feeling of satisfaction for no reason or rhyme in their hearts. "What did you say? Little fellow, you're courting death." Xianxia instantly exploded into rage when she heard this, and she was in a thundering rage. She flicked her sleeve, causing a strand of bright and golden immortal energy to surge explosively and shoot out violently. As a heavenly immortal, she'd cultivated for countless years, and she was absolutely a terrifying great figure that no one dared to offend in the mortal dimension and would receive veneration no matter where she went. How could she have imagined that a junior would actually dare to insult her as a bitch? At this moment, she attacked hatefully, causing golden and bright immortal energy to shoot out violently while covered densely in strands of the energy of the law that seemed like spirit serpents, and she set up a heaven-encompassing net with the intention of confining Chun, before giving him a lesson that he wouldn't be able to forget for his entire lifetime. The pupils of everyone constricted abruptly, and they almost exclaimed with shock because a heavenly immortal had suddenly attacked with rage, and she would probably suffer calamity. Slap! However, right at this moment, a pitch-black and icy-cold whip suddenly appeared out of thin air, and the whip shook before easily shattering the expanse of golden immortal energy. This wasn't the end of it. The momentum of the whip didn't reduce in the slightest as it suddenly appeared before Xianxia, and then it fiercely whipped onto her pretty and jade-white face before she could even react. A slap resounded out as a bloody scar appeared on Xianxia's face. Her skin and flesh had split open, and it was deep to the point her bones were visible, causing it to seem extremely terrifying and terrible. Xianxia was instantly stunned, and she even forgot the pain as she held her injured face while her entire body started trembling. Someone actually dared to launch a surprise attack against me? It wasn't just her. The eyes of everyone present, including Mei Luoxiao, focused while they revealed expressions of disbelief. A heavenly immortal was whipped on the face? Step, step, step. Right amidst this strange silence, a wave of clear and melodious footsteps resounded out, and then a slender and graceful beautiful figure appeared within everyone's field of vision. She had wavy golden hair coiled behind her head, an icy cold and beautiful appearance, sexy red lips, a jade-white forehead, and her tight clothes vividly revealed the curves on her devilish and soul-stirring figure. This person was exactly Liang Bing. Since she entered the hall, she'd always kept a low profile and stood at the side, causing everyone to mistake her for a follower or maidservant of Chen Shi's. Even though her appearance was breathtakingly gorgeous, but no one paid attention to her. But when she appeared within their fields of vision at this moment, everyone noticed that this icy cold and gorgeous woman wasn't just a maidservant with a pretty face, and she was an expert that kept a low profile. Everyone felt their minds become slightly dizzy. Where did she find such an expert that was actually able to whip the face of a heavenly immortal with a single strike? Moreover, the heavenly immortal didn't even have the time to dodge. Exactly how high is her cultivation? Only when Huiding and Lai Peng glanced at each other, while they both suddenly came to an understanding in their hearts. No wonder she was so composed. So it turns out that he has someone to rely on. You actually dared to launch a surprise attack against me. You're courting death. Meanwhile, Xianxia finally recovered from her shock, and her dignified and beautiful appearance became atrocious, while her eyes burned with flames of rage. Her figure flashed while her hands fluttered, and she moved a myriad of strands of immortal energy and the energy of the laws to execute a terrifying immortal art that struck down fiercely at Liang Bing. She'd completely not realized that even if one launched a surprise attack against her, with her cultivation at the heavenly immortal realm, was there anyone in the mortal dimension capable of launching a surprise attack against her and succeeding? On the other hand, someone that was capable of achieving this surely had a cultivation that wasn't lower to hers. Unfortunately, she'd lost her mind to rage at this moment, and she just felt that it was her carelessness that caused her to suffer such a humiliating whip. You're just a tiny heavenly immortal, yet you dare show your fangs before me? Liang Bing spoke with an indifferent and icy-cold voice, and then her wrist shook before a pitch-black and icy-cold whip flashed out abruptly. It shook space apart as it swept out, and it easily dealt with Xianxia's attack before a slap resounded out. It struck once more onto Xianxia's face, causing her to be struck back in midair and almost fall straight to the ground. This strike was simple and casual, yet it whipped a heavenly immortal flying. So exactly how terrifying was the strength contained within this strike? Everyone was terrified, and even Ancestor Fei Ling revealed a shocked expression. This strike was done in a completely upright manner, and there was absolutely no tricks or opportunistic elements. But it still whipped Xianxia flying, and this undoubtedly proved that the strength of this icy cold and gorgeous woman was too much stronger than Xianxia. Thump! Meanwhile, Xianxia staggered and almost rolled down to the ground. She coughed up blood repeatedly, while another bloody and terrifying scar appeared on her face. But at this moment, her expression had transformed into terror as she cried out in a sharp voice. "Who exactly are you? There's absolutely no expert like you in the mortal dimension." Mei Luoxiao had a serious expression as his flickering gaze stared at Xianxia. He seemed as if he wanted to see through Xianxia because an existence that was capable of easily defeating a heavenly immortal would absolutely not have simple origins. At this moment, the gazes of practically everyone in the hall had descended onto Liang Bing in unison. There was shock, curiosity, disbelief, and so on and so forth in their eyes. Even Mei Qingyuan, who knelt on the ground, realized that the situation was bad, and his expression changed repeatedly before he shut up obediently. Liang Bing couldn't be bothered about all this, and she walked over to Xianxi's side before crossing her arms before her chest. Her expression was icy cold and calm, and she was like a proud queen with an extremely imposing aura. "Why have you stopped shouting?" Xianxi slapped Mei Qingyuan once more, causing his face to become swollen to the point it seemed like a cooked pig's head. And Mei Qingyuan's face was completely beyond recognition as he let out shrill and miserable cries that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. It wasn't that Xianxi was intentionally humiliating Mei Qingyuan, but everything that occurred today had truly caused him to be too furious. If it wasn't for Liang Bing returning along with him, he would probably have lost his life this time. So since he could borrow the might of Liang Bing, how could he possibly show mercy to Mei Qingyuan? He slapped Mei Qingyuan over and over again without the slightest hesitation, and he slapped Mei Qingyuan to the point Mei Qingyuan fainted before he stopped with discontent. Something worthy of mentioning was that Mei Qingyuan wasn't knocked out from being slapped, and he was angered to the point of fainting. During this entire process, Mei Luoxiao's face twitched fiercely, and as it continued on, he couldn't restrain the rage in his heart and roared at Fei Ling via voice transmission. "Fellow Taoist Fei Ling, there's an enemy from the outside causing trouble in the sect now. So why aren't you activating the sect guarding slaughter formation? What are you waiting for?" The sect guarding slaughter formation of the 9 Radiant Sword sect was sufficient to easily annihilate an existence at the heavenly immortal realm, and it wouldn't be activated at all unless it was related to the survival of the sect. At this moment, Mei Luoxiao had obviously realized that it was absolutely impossible for them to be a match for Liang Bing with their strengths. So he sent a voice transmission to Fei Ling with the intention of utilizing the might of the sect guarding slaughter formation to capture and kill Liang Bing. However, never had he imagined that Fei Ling hadn't even spoken when the icy cold woman that stood before him seemed to have seen through his intentions, and her gaze swept over like a bolt of icy cold lightning. "I forgot to tell you, I've cultivated the soul origin nether god art. Even if voice transmissions are utilized, communication between people with cultivations lower than me can't escape my detection." Liang Bing spoke coldly. As she spoke, her wrist shook before the pitch-black and icy cold whip tore through the sky. It was like a mighty whip that was wielded in the hands of a fiend god, and it carried a peerlessly fierce strand of the energy of the laws as it fiercely struck towards Mei Luoxiao. Slap! 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 Clear and resounding sounds of a whip tearing through the sky resounded out within the hall, and it was like the repeated sounds of thunderclaps that shook the eardrums of everyone to the point they felt a sharp pain while the vital blood in their bodies roiled endlessly. This was the might of an expert at the mysterious immortal realm. Every single whip contained profound and faint energy of the laws, causing those with inferior strengths to feel as if they were hearing the furious roars of the heavens, and even their souls were affected. But compared to this, Mei Luoxiao's miserable howls were obviously even more shocking. A dignified and superior heavenly immortal was an existence that the myriad of beings in the world could only look up towards, yet now, he was like a prisoner that was being flogged. The clothes on his entire body were damaged. His flesh and skin had split apart while his hair was disheveled, and line after line of bloody scars covered his entire body, causing him to seem extremely miserable and wretched. He was indeed trying his best to struggle and practically exerted his entire strength, but it was futile in the end. Under Liang Bing's control, he was utterly unable to escape the predicament of being whipped. Liang Bing's expression was icy cold while her aura was extremely imposing. She utilized the pitch-black whip to a perfect level, and it enveloped and confined the surroundings. Moreover, she remained indifferent no matter how Mei Luoxiao howled with misery. Her cold and emotionless expression caused the bodies of everyone in the surroundings to go cold and feel as if they'd fallen into an icy pit. Under these sort of circumstances, no one dared to stop her. Even Xianxia stood stiffly on the spot with an indeterminate and struggling expression, and she didn't dare try to rescue him even after a long time, because the difference in strength was too great, and she knew very well that even if she came forward, she would be unable to escape the outcome of being whipped. In the end, it was Ancestor Fei Ling who couldn't watch on any longer, and he instructed Wen Huiting if he could persuade Xianxia to let Mei Luoxiao off. In any case, Mei Luoxiao was a great figure from the Immortal dimension and was related to the 9 Radiant Sword sect. Moreover, Mei Luoxiao and the others were under orders when they descended to the mortal dimension this time, and it was to assist the 9 Radiant Sword sect in resisting a formidable enemy. It was related to the arrangements of the 9 Radiant Sword sect during the upheaval of the 3 dimensions, so if they were to be offended too horribly, they would probably have no face to stay in the 9 Radiant Sword sect. Wen Huiting naturally didn't dare ignore Ancestor Fei Ling's instruction, and he could only send a voice transmission to Xianxia. Xianxia, I presume you've finished venting your anger, so please ask that person to stop. If this is to continue, it would be harmful to the sect. Xianxia acutely noticed that the sect master's attitude towards him was different, and the sect master's voice carried a slight tone of treating him as an equal. Even though this caused him to be surprised, he quickly came to an understanding. All of this was because of Liang Bing. All right, spare him for now, said Xianxia. Oh, you're just going to let it go like that? Liang Bing replied with a question. Even though she spoke like this, she still quickly stopped attacking, allowing Mei Luoxiao to finally escape calamity. All the clothes on his entire body were in rags, causing him to be practically nude. Moreover, there were numerous scars that were deep to the bone that covered his entire body, causing his appearance to seem extremely wretched and miserable. Xianxia shrugged and said helplessly, My anger is already vented, and if you continue whipping, then it will cost a human life. Oh wait, an immortal's life. Are you worried about being unable to gain a foothold in your sect in the future? Liang Bing seemed as if she thought of something. She was speaking true facts because after this matter, Mei Luoxiao, Xianxia, and all the other seniors in the Immortal dimension would surely hate Xianxia to the bone. So once Liang Bing left, then Xianxia's situation would probably become extremely bad. At that time, even if the sect master, Lai Peng, and the others had the intention to protect him, they would be willing but unable, and this was the true source of all trouble. It was precisely what Wei was worried about earlier. It was satisfying, but how would Xianxia deal with the aftermath? Before Xianxia could speak, Liang Bing said, Leave it to me. As she spoke, her palm flipped before a command token appeared on it, and then she flicked it out towards Xianxia. From the beginning until the end, she didn't offer a single word of explanation. But when Xianxia saw the command token in her hand clearly, her face instantly turned pale while her pupils suddenly constricted as she looked at Liang Bing. She was unable to restrain a wisp of dense fear from appearing on her face, and there was even a wisp of lingering fear. It seemed as if Liang Bing was a dreadful monster, and that command token was explaining how monstrous her authority and strength was. Instantly, everyone couldn't help but look towards the command token as they wanted to see exactly what divine object it was to actually cause a heavenly immortal to be afraid to such an extent. Unfortunately, it was grabbed and put away by Liang Bing before they could see it clearly. Since you recognize it, then you ought to understand who can be offended and who can't. Xianxia had a dazed expression before laughing bitterly in the end. She knew that they'd bit off more than they could chew this time, and their hope of taking revenge in their entire lifetimes was extremely tiny. Only Xianxia faintly noticed that the command token was actually very ordinary. The only part of it that wasn't ordinary was the pattern of a ruler inscribed on its surface and an ancient character that represented her clan, Liang, written with vigorous strokes. Obviously, this command token represented the forces of the Liang clan in the Immortal dimension, and it allowed Xianxia to completely understand that compared to the 9 Radiant Sword sect in the Immortal dimension, the Liang clan was undoubtedly even more enormous. Otherwise, with Xianxia's identity as an emissary of the 9 Radiant Sword sect that came from the Immortal Dimension, she would absolutely not be terrified to such an extent by a command token. After that, Xianxia truly had no face to continue staying here. So she took Mei Luoxiao along as she turned around and left with a dejected and terrified expression. Everyone in the hall couldn't help but be shocked that Liang Bing was able to torment 2 heavenly immortals to such an extent. On the other hand, Ancestor Fei Ling flicked his sleeve and collected up all the profligate disciples from the Immortal Dimension that lay on the ground before he chased after Xianxia. Couldn't be helped. Even if they'd lost all face, Xianxia and the others were still emissaries that had descended from the Immortal Dimension, so he couldn't be neglectful to them in the slightest. In merely a short moment, the entire hall became quiet once more. On the other hand, the gaze when Huiding and Lai Peng looked at Chun Shi with had changed. It seemed to contain admiration and disbelief, but because Liang Bing was present here, both of them had the tacit understanding to not ask anything. Chun Shi didn't explain Liang Bing's identity because if nothing unexpected happened, then Liang Bing would leave once he passed down the immeasurable virtue technique to her, so there was no need to explain. Lai Peng left moments later as he had to head to a concealed place outside the sect to bring back everyone from the West Radiance Peak. Now that everything was settled, it wasn't right to make all of them continue to suffer injustice outside the sect. On the other hand, when those core seed disciples outside the hall noticed that the sect master had something to talk about with Chun Shi, they chose to leave as well. They were extremely excited, and they knew that it wouldn't be long before the news of Chun Shi's mighty return would shock the entire sect. As for the encounter of those distinguished guests from the Immortal Dimension, it would probably be sealed up. After all, it was too humiliating, and if it were to be spread, it would be harmful to the reputation of the entire 9 Radiant Sword sect. Sect Master, I remember that people from the Immortal Dimension can't casually descend to the Mortal Dimension, right? So why would Mei Qingyuan and the others appear in our sect? Within the spacious hall, Chun Shi spoke about the question that he'd kept in his heart for a long time. When Huiding seemed to have expected Chun Shi would ask this, and he explained right away with a warm voice. It turned out that during the period of over a year that Chun Shi had left, the figures of xenorace experts had appeared repeatedly in the Dark Reverie, causing the powers and sects in the entire world to be anxious and prepare for war. Moreover, there were large-scale battles occurring at practically every single moment in the various corners of the Dark Reverie. It could be said that the current Dark Reverie was in a state where undercurrents were brewing, and a storm was approaching. Everything seemed like an omen to the upheaval of the 3 dimensions. Especially in the past 2 months, 9 xenorace Saint Emperors had appeared successively in the southern part of the Dark Reverie, on an uninhabited mountain range 50,000 kilometers away from Blaze City. They led countless xenorace armies to take cities and seize territory, and not only had they occupied Blaze City, the flames of battle even affected the nearby Heavenly Insight Palace. During an entire 1 month of time, the Heavenly Insight Palace that was a power on par with the 10 great immortal sects had actually been captured by the xenorace army. The sect was destroyed, its Tao inheritance obliterated, and this incident completely shook the world. This caused the situation in the entire Dark Reverie to become tense, causing all the great sects to start making a move after hearing the news. They either started expanding their territory without restraint, widely recruited disciples, or directly closed the door to their sect and entered into seclusion deep within the mountain. On the other hand, those small powers and small sects knew they were powerless to resist the xenorace army, so they sought protection from the 10 great immortal sects and the 6 lineages of the demon sections. All in all, the entire Dark Reverie revealed a scene of chaos. Powers were fleeing and moving all over the Dark Reverie, while extremely horrifying battles could be seen anywhere, causing the world to be covered in a rain of blood and foul winds. Under this situation where a storm was approaching, the great figures in the Immortal Dimension were unable to sit still because the Dark Reverie was the closest large world to the Immortal Dimension, so once it fell, it would bring an immeasurable threat to the Immortal Dimension. Thus, during the recent period of time, all the extraordinary powers like the 10 great immortal sects and 6 lineages of the demon sects welcomed immortal emissaries from their respective sects. For example, Mei Luoxiao Xianxia and the others were emissaries from the 9 Radiant Sword sect in the Immortal dimension. At this moment, Xianxia finally understood everything, and his brows couldn't help but knit together tightly. He never expected that, in just a single year of time, the situation in the Dark Reverie would actually become so grim. If he wasn't wrong, the 50,000 kilometers of territory around Blaze City that was occupied by the 9 great Xenorace Saint Emperors was precisely the place he escaped the 9th hell from. When he thought up to here, his heart sank because long ago, while he was still in the 9th hell, he was clearly aware that the reason those Xenorace experts had broken through the dimension walls and attacked the 9th hell was to make the 9th hell a foothold for them to prepare to siege the entire Dark Reverie. Because even the laws of the Heaven Tao didn't exist in the 9th hell, so it was a superb place for the Xenorace to hide themselves. Now, it would seem like the Xenorace had obviously attained their objective. Right? Sect Master, has the Heavenly Insight Palace really been completely annihilated? Xianxia thought of Su Qingyan, the peerlessly beautiful young woman from the Dartang dynasty that had a good relationship with him. She joined the Heavenly Insight Palace. When Huiting sighed, its foundation is destroyed. Even though many people were fortunate enough to escape, it's impossible to rebuild the former brilliance of the Heavenly Insight Palace. The forces of the Heavenly Insight Palace were on par with the 9 Radiant Sword sect. Yet such an colossus had actually been annihilated in a month, and it caused Wen Huiting, who was the sect master of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, to feel unprecedented pressure. When the heavens emit killing intent, the stars are moved. When the earth emits killing intent, dragons and serpents arise from the ground. And when humans emit killing intent, the world is overturned. These are only small-scale events, and it's only one of the 3 types of killing intents. The Dark Reverie won't enter into great chaos for now, and it would truly be an omen of great chaos when even the Heaven Tao changes. Suddenly, the tiny cauldron's voice sounded out in Xianxia's ears. The tiny cauldron spoke abruptly, causing Xianxia to be shocked in his heart. Only when the heavens emit killing intent will the upheaval of the 3 dimensions really begin. This was already related to a change in the Heaven Tao, and it caused to be difficult for even Xianxia to guess exactly how the entire world will change at that time. He knew that it would surely not be a good thing. West Radiance Peak. When Xianxia returned from True Martial Peak, the entire West Radiance Peak had recovered its bustling atmosphere. Ling Bai, Kue, Amon, Mu Kue, Axiu, Huomoliai and the others, and the clansmen of the 9th Hell Tribe had all gathered at the peak of the mountain. They were naturally excited to the extreme when they saw Xianxia return. That night, a campfire blazed once more at the peak of West Radiance Peak. The fragrance of wine suffused the surroundings while they chatted joyfully and had a happy gathering. According to what Huomoliai said, even though they'd recently left the West Radiance Peak temporarily, they didn't suffer any injustice as they possessed the care of Wen Huiting, and they were only unable to restrain their hate when Mei Qingyuan was mentioned. But all of this had already passed, and they'd already heard from Elder Lai Peng that Mei Qingyuan and the others had already suffered grievous punishment, so they couldn't be bothered to spoil their mood because of some profligate disciples from the Immortal dimension. Only Shuyan's mood was slightly complicated. She was originally a follower by Bing Shirtyan's side, yet she was forced to follow by Xianxia's side because of Axiu. In other words, her identity was actually very embarrassing. She wasn't a member of the Heavenflow Dao sect, nor was she a member of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, and she was at most barely able to be considered a follower of Xianxia's. However, regretfully, this identity had never received the acknowledgement of Xianxia. Fortunately, during this period on the West Radiance Peak, no one had taken her to be an outsider and no one even asked about her past. This caused her to not feel so uncomfortable as she lived here, and she gradually aroused a sense of belonging in her heart. She liked how it was peaceful here. She liked how the faces of everyone here brimmed with smiles of happiness. There was no open and covert strife or deceiving and scheming against each other. It was simply like an otherworldly paradise. So when Mei Qingyuan suddenly appeared and threatened to take her as a slave, she was completely terrified because even though she was an earthly immortal realm expert, she was still too weak to stand up to profligate disciples from the Immortal dimension. Coupled with her embarrassing identity, it even caused her to feel despair. She felt that no one in the entire world would save her. At that moment, the intense feeling of helplessness that arose within her heart was something she still vividly remembered even until now. Moreover, never had she imagined that not only did Axiu not abandon her, even everyone on the West Radiance Peak didn't stand idly by. It was also from that moment onward that her heart finally found its belonging. So when she heard of Xianxia's mighty return and how he furiously bashed Mei Qingyuan and the others, even though she knew it wasn't purely for her sake, she was still filled with gratitude. Only after she experienced extreme despair and helplessness did she understand how precious these friendly feelings were. Qianxi, thank you. Shuyan finally mustered up the courage to walk over to Qianxi before drinking the cup of wine she held in her hand, and it was unknown if her extremely smooth and charming face revealed tipsiness from drinking or was stimulated by her nervousness, but it seemed to be extraordinarily delicate and alluring under the night sky. After she finished drinking, she ran off swiftly like an embarrassed young woman. Qianxi was stunned, but he still finished the cup of wine in his hand before turning to look at Axiu and spoke while pretending to speak in a casual tone. With your ability, you're probably not afraid of those people from the immortal dimension, right? He knew very clearly that on the way to the talisman dimension, his senior sister Liang had once said that this young woman who liked to wear a green dress had eyes that curved into two crescents when she smiled, and always carried precious fruits that couldn't be finished was a disciple from the Shenyuan clan. Moreover, she was the type that possessed a rather respected status. Moreover, while he was in the talisman dimension, Wan Renyi had received the respect of Nan Shouchong, Chu Xiao, and the others because she had a marriage agreement with a disciple from the Shenyuan clan. So as far as Qianxi was concerned, with Axiu's ability, it would absolutely be sufficient to deal with Mei Qingyuan and the other profligate disciples. But she just happened to not act in this way, and this was slightly strange. Axiu had Bai Kuei embraced in her arms and was combing the fur of this little fellow while her beautiful little face was covered in a happy smile, and she said casually in reply, "Yes, I'm really not afraid of them, but out of respect for those seniors of yours, I couldn't bash them, right? How embarrassing would that be? So I thought for a while and didn't fuss about it with them since I didn't lose anything." As she spoke, she suddenly raised her little face and blinked her bright and shiny eyes as she said with excitement, "Hey, since you're back, should I go give them a beating now?" She had a helpless expression as he corrected her. "How many times have I told you not to call me, hey?" Axiu chuckled and didn't mind at all, and she just glanced at Liang Bing, who was at the side of Chun, she while seeming to be lost in thought, before she muttered in a low voice, "That big sister was deceived and captured back here by you, right?" When the word capture was mentioned, She instantly thought of Liang, and he thought of that joke she made. Right after that, he recalled that Liang Bing had once said that she'd cultivated the soul origin nethergod art, allowing her to easily detect the voice transmission of others. His face instantly froze while he couldn't help but glance at Liang Bing. Sure enough, he saw her icy cold and gorgeous face had stiffened. Obviously, she's thought of some things like just him because of the word capture. She couldn't help but be slightly embarrassed in his heart. Yet he berated Axiu angrily instead. "If we're talking about deception, then you're the liar. Tell me, are you surnamed Shenyuan?" Axiu didn't have the slightest reaction of someone who'd been exposed, and she spoke very casually. "Right, but I've never deceived you because you never asked me." She was stunned, and then he thought about it carefully. "I seem to have really never asked this question." "Shenyuan." The nearby Liang Bing suddenly raised her head while her gaze descended onto Axiu like a bolt of cold lightning, and she seemed to be slightly surprised. On the other hand, Axiu already lowered her head to tease Bai Kuei, and she seemed to have entirely not noticed Liang Bing's gaze. She knew very well that Liang Bing had probably recognized Axiu's identity through the words Shenyuan. But he didn't say anything further because he didn't know how Axiu came to arrive by his side. Subsequently, she chatted with Huamoliai and the other seniors Meng Wei and Moya. He found out that besides cultivating, all of them had been training all those youths from the 9th Hell tribe all day and night, causing She to instantly feel much more relaxed. Amidst their conversation, Meng Wei said abruptly, "Soldiers are nurtured for 1,000 days yet used all on one day. These children of my clan have already shed their immaturity. but their live combat experience is extremely lacking. Now that the world is in chaos and the xenorace are repeatedly appearing in the world, Moya and I have considered it repeatedly before finally deciding to seize this opportunity to take them into the outside world to gain tempering. Xianxia was stunned, and then he pondered deeply before he said, "Wait for some time, and we'll head to the Violet Thistle Mountains by clan once I've successfully undergone the tribulation. The little fellows from the Violet Lightning and Azure Frost camps can temper themselves all along the way." Meng Wei nodded. "All right," Moya said with surprise instead. "You're going to advance to the earthly immortal realm?" Xianxia said with a smile. "Yes, I'll be greeting the Azure Lightning tribulation in less than 2 months of time. Then you have to make proper preparations. I heard that it's extremely dangerous when cultivators overcome the tribulation to advance into the earthly immortal realm. It usually required numerous seniors from their sects to stand on guard at the side, and if there isn't sufficient preparation, then there'll probably be danger to your life." Moya spoke seriously. "Exactly. Brother Xianxia, calm your heart and prepare in these next 2 months. You must charge into the earthly immortal realm in one go." Meng Wei laughed heartily as he said, "With your natural talent, you'll absolutely be able to advance easily. Planning lies with man, the outcome with heaven. I've already prepared bitterly for a long time just to surmount this barrier in my path. So everything else depends on the heavens." Xianxia stood with his hands behind his back while he looked up into the sky above him and laughed lightheartedly. His handsome face was filled with confidence and longing. "I really have prepared for a very long time, and I've gone all out." Deep into the night, everyone had dispersed. Xianxia called Chen Yen over to his side, and he sighed emotionally for a long time in his heart as he looked at this dark young man that was simply and unyielding. Since he took Chen Yen as a disciple in Marquis Wen's estate, over a year had passed until now, and it was very difficult for him to imagine how a youth that was only at the congenital realm traveled a myriad of kilometers to arrive safely at the 9 Radiant Sword Sect. Did thorns cover his path, and he traveled with difficulty to arrive here? Or did he experience a myriad of difficulties and killing intent at every step to arrive here? Xianxia was unable to guess the answer, but he knew extremely clearly that when he prepared this test for Chen Yen that day, he'd pondered deeply for a long time because the path between Marquis Wen's estate to the 9 Radiant Sword Sect was filled with numerous dangerous mountain ranges, rivers, and places of danger. If one wanted to pass through this journey safely, then only someone with great wisdom and willpower was capable of accomplishing it. Of course, the precondition was not receiving the assistance of another. For the sake of this, Xianxia had even given a cosmic immortal talisman to Chen Yen for the sake of allowing Chen Yen to flee with his life if he suffered lethal danger. But obviously, Chen Yen didn't utilize it because he'd personally handed it over to Xianxia. This caused Xianxia to sigh emotionally once more in his heart. If it was another, then not to mention a Violet Palace realm cultivator, even a Nether Transformation realm cultivator would probably be unable to resist the temptation of the cosmic immortal talisman, and that person pocketing it is within expectation. But Chen Yen didn't do this. I wonder if it's because he doesn't know the value of this immortal talisman, or he'd relied on his willpower to refuse this temptation. Xianxia was unable to guess the answer. But all of this was able to prove how outstanding Chen Yen was. So even if Chen Yan's natural talent and natural endowment was extremely ordinary, in Xianxia's eyes, only a youth like this was suitable to be his personal disciple. Because this youth possessed a heart that belonged to an expert. On that night, Xianxia passed down numerous things to Chen Yen, and all of them were profundities from the all-heaven truth. On the other hand, Chen Yen listened with extreme seriousness and meticulousness. Even if he was unable to understand it for now, he silently and forcefully remembered it in his heart, and his persistence and devotion towards his path to the Tao caused even Xianxia to feel extreme admiration in his heart. Unknowingly, dawn had arrived. Xianxia stood up and instructed Chen Yen to go cultivate and comprehend first before he walked out of the room and passed a jade slip to Liang Bing. The jade slip recorded the cultivation technique of the immeasurable virtue technique. "Aren't you going to stay for a few more days?" Xianxia asked with a smile. "It wouldn't be late for me to bother you after the upheaval of the 3 dimensions ends." Liang Bing stared at Xianxia while she replied seriously. But at that time, we'll probably be meeting in the immortal dimension. The immortal dimension? Xianxia pondered deeply for a moment, and he seemed to have thought of something, causing him to look at the distant sky while he muttered, "We'll surely meet each other in the immortal dimension." Casual words reveal much to a suspicious listener. Liang Bing instantly started thinking in the wrong direction, causing a wisp of embarrassment to inadvertently flash past her gorgeous and extraordinary face. And then she glared fiercely at Xianxia before turning and leaving. "See you. Don't we have to shake hands when bidding each other farewell? Wait until we meet again." Her clear and melodious footsteps resounded out like a gurgling spring in the morning mist, and it curled upwards faintly and repeatedly while she quickly vanished without a trace. 9 Radiance Sword Sect. The news of Xianxia's return shook the entire sect overnight. But when all the disciples and elders headed to West Radiance Peak to pay a visit to Xianxia, they were told that Xianxia had entered into closed-door cultivation and was preparing to charge into the earthly immortal realm. This caused all of them to be surprised and even shocked. If they considered it carefully, Xianxia had only joined the sect for a little over 10 years. At that time, he was only a cultivator at the rebirth realm, yet now he was actually charging into the earthly immortal realm. Such a heaven-defying speed of cultivation was sufficient to cause most geniuses in the world to be cast beneath a shade. This matter had quickly shaken the entire sect. For a time, the matter of Xianxia being about to charge into the earthly immortal realm became the hottest topic in the sect. Everyone was guessing if Xianxia would actually be able to overcome the Azure Lightning Tribulation and smoothly advance into the earthly immortal realm. In my opinion, with Elder Xianxia's natural endowment, it's sufficient for him to easily overcome the tribulation and attain the earthly immortal realm. After all, he's able to surmount a realm and slaughter earthly immortal realm experts while still at the nether transformation realm. How many people in the world possess such terrifying reserves? Some people were filled with confidence towards Xianxia and spoke with certainty. Indeed, since Elder Xianxia joined our 9 Radiance Sword Sect, he revealed the graceful bearing of a peerless genius that was like a scorching sun in the midday sky. It's impossible to find another person that can compare with him in the entire dark reverie. But the tribulation of the heavenly immortal is the most dangerous barrier on the path of cultivation because it's the transformation from mortal to immortal. Success would allow him to soar into the sky with a single step, whereas failure would end with his death. Such a tribulation isn't so easily overcome. Since the ancient times until now, countless renowned and peerless geniuses had appeared, yet only few survived through this barrier of the earthly immortal realm, causing them to fall like the rain. Compared to those cultivators with mediocre natural talent, their tribulation is 100 times more difficult. Is this like the saying, "The heavens envy those with outstanding ability"? It can only be said as the higher the natural talent, the more outstanding the natural endowment, the greater the might of the tribulation one faced would be. This is a principle that's irrefutable since the ancient times until now. But Elder Xianxia will surely be able to succeed. With the seniors of our sect standing on guard at the side, there's probably no need to worry that any danger would arise. We'll know when the time comes. Discussing so much now will only cause groundless worry. While everyone in the 9 Radiant Sword Sect was discussing whether Xianxia would be able to overcome the tribulation successfully, Xianxia, who wore an apricot yellow Taoist robe, was drinking wine and sipping tea with a relaxed and carefree bearing at the bank of the sword purification pool on West Radiance Peak. This was his clone. His main body had already entered the world of stars and was comprehending the immeasurable virtue technique while tempering the might of his heart core. He was waiting for his heart core to advance into the heart-soul realm before he would leave his closed-door cultivation. Xianxia was able to clearly sense that the heavenly tribulation would descend when his main body left its closed-door cultivation. But he'd stopped thinking about all of this and just calmly enjoyed this peace. He had a tranquil bearing and a clear mind, yet he didn't emanate an extraordinary aura. He seemed to have completely fused into the world instead, and he enjoyed himself by idly watching the clouds roil and silently savoring the landscape. This was a type of condensation, a mentality of returning to nature after experiencing countless accumulation and attaining one's limit. All complication was eliminated to return to simplicity. Xianxia had already been accumulating in the nether transformation realm for a long time. No matter if it was Dao insight, cultivation, or combat experience, all of them had attained an unprecedented state, and it was an extreme above perfection. What he needed to do now was truly very simple. It was to cultivate the profundity of the heart-soul before silently waiting for the descent of the heavenly tribulation. On the 7th day that he entered into closed-door cultivation and refused all guests, snow suddenly descended from the sky. The snowflakes were large like mats as they descended down and enveloped West Radiance Peak, causing the entire surroundings to be sealed in icy and snow. Xianxia held a jug of wine while drifting on the boat atop the clear lake and under the snow and wind. Chan Yen sat cross-legged at the back of the boat while boiling tea on a red mud furnace. Smoke coiled up while the fragrance of tea drifted out, and it added a trace of warmth to the piercingly cold weather. What's the heaven Dao? This mountain, this water, the ripples in this clear lake, the path these snowflakes flew. Everything contains the aura of the Dao. Ordinary people feel it's pleasant to the eye, yet I see the profundities of the grand Dao in it. Xianxia held the wine jug as he leaned on the stern, and he stretched his body comfortably before sighing with a smile. This is what it's like to see the truth in the ordinary and hear thunderclaps in silence. Chun Yen puckered his lips while keeping quiet. He was unable to understand what his master was saying, but he committed every single word to memory. Perhaps I'll be able to comprehend the profundities within it when I attain Master's cultivation realm. Chen Yen thought like this in his heart. On the 14th day that he entered into closed-door cultivation and refused all guests. At the bank of the sword purification pool, Xianxia led Chen Yen to pay a visit to his eldest senior brother, Huomoliai, second senior brother Lu Shang, third senior brother Yiqinzi, fourth senior brother Duan Yi, and fifth senior sister Aju. As for his sixth senior brother Qing Yu was busy training the youths of the 9th Hell Tribe, so Xianxia didn't disturb him. Even though this sword's edge is completely revealed, it's too easy to snap. Moreover, even though the refinement technique is skillful, it's too complicated and can't bear intense usage. Huomoliai looked at the sword in his hand for a short moment before his brows knit together, and he judged it bluntly. This sword was just refined by Xianxia. The blade revealed a faint green color while its surface was covered in talisman markings, and it overflowed with a bright light and emanated a strand of fierce and sharp aura. Chen Yen was stunned. This was a top-grade heaven-rank magic treasure that was personally refined by his master. As far as he was concerned, it was simply like a divine weapon. But, in his martial uncle Huomoliai's opinion, it became so useless and was even taken to be useless. Xianxia didn't mind at all instead, and he smiled before borrowing the zither that his second senior brother Lu Shang had personally created. Ding! In the next moment, his fingers fluttered about and plucked the zither strings, causing strands of a cool and graceful tune to flow out like a fluttering butterfly or gurgling spring, and it caused Chen Yan's mind and body to be intoxicated. After he completed a song, Lu Shang's expression was slightly gloomy, and then he sighed in the end. Little junior brother, the zither is the voice of the heart. Your aura of battle was too strong in this song, causing it to be too clamorous. Chan Yen frowned when he heard this, and he was slightly indignant in his heart as he felt it was unfair because this song was clearly very nice. Xianxia still smiled and played a game with his third senior brother Yiqinzi. Yet halfway through the game and before they'd actually fought, Yiqinzi had stood up furiously and flicked his sleeve before leaving. Little junior brother, I never expected that you're actually a terrible Go player as well. Alas. Yiqinzi shook his head and sighed while deeply grieved. Chen Yen was stunned. What's wrong with Master today? Why is he constantly attacking the strengths of others with things that he's weak in? Subsequently, Chen Yen saw his master write some words with strokes that were vigorous and like swords, and they emanated a ghastly and fierce aura that assaulted the face, causing him to feel a piercing pain from his eyes even when looking at it from afar. It's really not bad. Little junior brother, you've already attained proficiency. But, if you want to improve in the Tao of writing, then you have to work really hard. This was fourth senior brother, Duan Yi's, evaluation. Xianxia paid no attention to it, and then he drew a painting for his fifth senior sister, A Jew. A Jew stared with her eyes wide open before tearing Chun. She's painting apart on the spot. She spoke bluntly that it was too terrible because his painting was simply covered in a foul aura and didn't have any artistic style at all. However, she led Chan Yen to leave dejectedly under the disappointed gazes of his senior brothers and senior sister. I'm not skilled in equipment refinement, the zither, go, painting, or writing. I'm only slightly learned in the Tao of Talisman, and I'm diligently striving after it. However, the Tao of Talismans is boundlessly vast, and I'm barely able to be considered as having learned the basics. At the bank of the sword purification pool, she said, "This is the path of the Tao. Every single cultivator has a path that belongs to themselves, and only by persisting on this part would one be able to accomplish something." Chen Yan's entire body shook while he seemed as if he was suddenly enlightened. He instantly understood the meaning behind everything his master had done today. The path of the Tao. Right, where is my path? Chen Yan had a blank expression while he seemed like a clay statue and fell completely into deep contemplation. Unknowingly, time flowed by, and he was unaware of the changes in the world. She couldn't help but grin when he saw this. This was all that he was able to pass down to Chen Yen. As for everything else like cultivation techniques, Tao insights, and martial techniques, all of it wasn't important because only by understanding what one persisted towards in one's heart would one be truly considered to have understood the true essence of cultivation. Since that day onward, she stayed in seclusion, and traces of him couldn't be found on West Radiance Peak any longer. Everyone wasn't surprised by this because all of them knew that he was surely preparing to overcome the tribulation. After all, according to the amount of time that had passed, he would greet the first wave of heavenly tribulation to advance into the earthly immortal realm in a little over a month from now. The world of stars. She's main body and clone sat facing each other. Strands of blazing virtue gold light effused out, flowed, and spread from his main body. It was dazzling, vast, and solemn, and it caused his entire body to be bathed in a seemingly eternal divine radiance. On the other hand, his heart core surged rhythmically within his body and seemed to be exuberant with vitality. A phantom that was on the verge of condensing into form was forming seals with its hands while it sat cross-legged above the heart core. Moreover, its outline had already become clear while only its facial features were still blurry. It was the heart soul, this cultivation technique that cultivated heart energy, the immeasurable virtue technique, was extremely miraculous indeed. The immeasurable virtue technique condensed virtue to temper heart energy repeatedly, and it circulated through the body like true essence circulated through the meridians, and shaman energy flowed through the flesh and blood in his body. It seemed to have formed a perfect system. His heart energy became even more condensed and thick under this sort of circulation and tempering. It was precisely because he cultivated this cultivation technique that she was extremely clearly aware that if he purely relied on accumulating virtue energy to improve his heart energy, then it would be almost impossible for him to cultivate a heart soul in his entire lifetime. It's almost there. The heart soul will surely be able to be condensed in around a year of time. She's clone stared at the change in the vital energy of his main body while he silently deduced the time in his heart. The temporal laws in the world of stars was different. A year here was only around a month in the outside world, and at that time it would be the day the tribulation descended. 1 month later. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Numerous sounds of air being torn apart shot into the sky and approached West Radiance Peak from all directions. The sect master, Wen Huiding, the enforcement elder Lai Peng, and all the earthly immortal realm experts that lived in seclusion were amongst them. After them was all the core seed disciples from Divine Radiance Peak and the outer court and inner court elders. The group was vast, mighty, and magnificent. On the other hand, Huamoliai, Mengwei, and the others had stopped what they were doing and greeted the arrival of the sect master, Wen Huiding, and the others. Finally here, Axiu embraced by Kuei while her beautiful figure stood amidst some flowering shrubs, and her clear eyes looked up towards the distant sky. In the extreme distance, there was a black line surging and rumbling over, and it was like a strand of ink. Everywhere it passed, even the sky was transformed into a horrifying pitch-black color, blotting out the sky and covering the sun, transforming day into night, This was the sign of the creation of tribulation clouds. Gusts of wind surged while the clouds roiled. Rumbling and whistling filled the heavens and the earth. At the peak of West Radiance Peak, the sect master Wen Huiting and the others looked at the sky with serious expressions. Violent gales rages while waves of clouds roiled, and the gales that whistled by caused their clothes to flutter. As soon as all the disciples arrived on West Radiance Peak, they were placed at the bottom of the peak by the seniors of the sect. At this moment, all of them had their eyes wide open while looking up at the sky, and their expressions carried a wisp of boundless anticipation. The tribulation of an earthly immortal. It carried an extremely great attractive force to any cultivator because so long as one overcame it, one would rise in the world and evolve from mortal into immortal. Even though an earthly immortal couldn't compare to a heavenly immortal, an earthly immortal was already different from the myriad of cultivators in the world. Today, phenomenon suddenly appeared in the sky, and all of them were clearly aware that it was the earthly immortal tribulation that Elder Xianxia was about to undergo. So no one would miss this scene and had come over successively. This was a type of attendance of a celebration, and it was also a rare opportunity to observe the tribulation. So would anyone miss it? On the other hand, the sect master and the other higher-ups of the 9 Radiant Sword sect had come in unison for the sake of standing on guard for Xianxia. There was no room for carelessness when a peerless genius and outstanding disciple like Xianxia greeted the tribulation because all of them had experienced it and were clearly aware that the more extraordinary one's natural talent was, the greater the envy of the heavens one would suffer, causing the might of the tribulation one suffered to become even more terrifying. Therefore, they were already prepared to protect Xianxia with all their might, and they would absolutely not allow any accidents to occur. Xianxia really said that? Wen Huiting frowned as he looked at Chen Yen. Sect Master had indeed given me such instructions before he entered into closed-door cultivations. He said it was a mere heavenly tribulation, so it wasn't worth to mobilize a large force and trouble all the seniors of the sect to arrive here because he himself was sufficient to deal with it. Chen Yen bowed as he replied, "A mere heavenly tribulation?" Wen Huiting and Lai Peng laughed bitterly without end when they heard this because these sentiments were really too high-sounding, and someone that didn't know Xianxia would probably call him wildly arrogant. Since it's like this, then should we still set up the formation? An elder frowned as he asked, "Let's just set it up." Even though he possesses extraordinary and shocking natural talent and combat strength that's peerless in the world, he has only cultivated for a short period of time in the end. He doesn't know how terrifying the Azure Lightning Tribulation is. As his seniors in the sect, we ought to prepare some things to avoid any accidents from occurring. Another elder pondered deeply before he spoke. I think there's no need to take the trouble. All those years ago, Qing Shui overcame 9 levels of the heavenly tribulations overnight. How peerlessly dazzling was she at that time? As far as I'm concerned, regardless of natural talent, combat strength, or any other aspect, Xianxia's even greater than Qing Shui. It's merely the first level of the heavenly tribulations, so how could it possibly obstruct his footsteps? Yes, that's true as well. But it's better to have some preparation and act according to the situation. After all, it's the heavenly tribulation, and it can't be estimated, so it's better to be safe. All the elders discussed successively. Right at this moment, Wen Huiting's expression changed slightly, while his gaze that was like a bolt of lightning swept swiftly towards the sky. The other elders noticed something as well, and their voices stopped abruptly while their gazes shot towards the sky as well. The bright sun hung high in the dark blue sky. However, shockingly, the clear dark blue sky's border was covered in a layer of pitch-black tribulations cloud that were roiling and condensing, whereas the center of the sky was covered in countless stars. The numerous stars were studded the clear sky like gems, and they revealed beauty that shocked the soul. However, this scene caused the expressions of everyone to suddenly turn grim. Stars at daytime, Wen Huiting muttered with a voice that carried shock that couldn't be concealed. This is the sign of the appearance of a variant that isn't allowed to exist by the Heaven Tao. Once this sign appears, it indicates the divine lightning of judgment are about to descend into the world. Lai Peng's voice trembled slightly. Such a phenomenon hasn't appeared even once in a few tens of thousands of years, and it only appeared successively a few times during the period the gods of the primeval times went on an expedition, and it annihilated numerous great figures that defied the heavens. But now it actually appeared once more. Could it be that a variant that defies the heavens is about to emerge into the world once more? Even if these higher-ups of the 9 Radiant Sword sect were great figures in the dark reverie, their hearts still couldn't help but go cold when they saw this shocking scene before them. Axiu's green dress swayed while her jet-black waist-long hair fluttered in the wind, and her eyes stared at the sky instead while she muttered, "It really is like this. Sixth uncle really didn't deceive me." "What? Stars in daytime?" Xianxia charged out of her room, and she couldn't help but cry out involuntarily when she looked at the scene in the sky. This voice instantly jolted awake Mei Luoxiao that was recuperating in the room, and his expression tensed up while he said with surprise and bewilderment, "Stars in daytime? A variant suddenly appeared when the 3 dimensions are about to undergo an upheaval. Could it be that it's a sign of something?" Countless experts were alarmed in the entire dark reverie, and numerous old seniors that lived in seclusion suddenly opened their eyes from their closed-door cultivation and looked towards the sky from afar. At this instant, most of the cultivators in the world had stopped what they were doing, and their gazes that were filled with surprise and bewilderment had converged onto the sky above them. Violet Thistle Mountains by Clan. The patriarch by Jingchen slurped down the entire bowl of noodles and burped with satisfaction before he opened his eyes and sneered towards the sky as he lightly spat out a few words. "You still refuse to give up your evil intentions." After that, he waved his hand to call a disciple over, and then he said, "Send news via the teleportation formation. Ask that sister of mine to return quickly. Quickly." At the instant stars appeared in daytime, it was like a flash that appeared in the entire sky above the dark reverie before vanishing without a trace. Why has it vanished? Everyone in the world was surprised and bewildered. When the Heaven Dao revealed such a phenomenon, it meant that a variant that defied the heavens had appeared, and this variant had been detected by the Heaven Dao. So the divine lightning of judgment was about to descend and annihilate the variant. But now, it merely appeared for an instant before this phenomenon vanished without a trace. Could it be that it means the variant has been eliminated? No one was able to guess the actual answer, and all of them were puzzled. West Radiance Peak. At this moment, everyone had recovered from their shock, and they still carried a lingering fear in their hearts. Ha! The appearance of the stars in daytime just happened to be the day Chen she's going to overcome the tribulation. It's truly a coincidence. Lai Peng roared with laughter and tried to ease up the atmosphere. But as soon as these words were spoken, he suddenly noticed that the expressions of everyone in the surroundings was slightly strange, and even the sect master was no exception. Could it be that all of you think Xianxia is? Lai Peng was shocked in his heart and spoke hesitantly, but right after that he shut his mouth tightly. Isn't this too shocking? How could Xianxia possibly be related to the appearance of stars in daytime? It's a coincidence. It's definitely a coincidence. Lai Peng shook his head while his heart rose and fell indeterminately. Everyone, there's no need to continue guessing. If Xianxia's a variant, then the Heaven Dao would have sent down the divine lightning of judgment a long time ago, and it would be utterly impossible for him to be alive at this moment. But all of this didn't happen, so it's obviously not related to Xianxia. After maintaining silence for a long time, when Huiding spoke slowly, everyone pondered briefly when they heard this, and then their expressions eased up. Right, the shocking phenomenon of stars in daytime only appeared for a mere instant, and the divine lightning of judgment didn't descend. So how could it possibly be related to Xianxia? Rumble. Right at this moment, a wave of thunderclaps that were like a surging tempest suddenly sounded out, and it resounded throughout 50,000 kilometers in the surroundings. For a time, violent winds raged and whistled, sand and rocks flew about, and thunderclaps resounded in the entire heavens and the earth. The demon beasts in the mountain range of the 9 Radiant Sword sect were terrified to the point of trembling and lying prone on the ground. The pitch-black tribulation cloud was like juice splashed with ink, and it completely covered the entire sky above West Radiance Peak, causing it to become extremely pitch black. Moreover, the thick tribulation clouds were suffused with an extremely terrifying aura of heavenly might, and it oppressed everyone to the point they felt suffocated. Crackle! Crackle! Numerous narrow and long silver-colored arcs of lightning flickered within the tribulation cloud, and they were like violent silver-colored snakes that were dancing about madly. They seemed like the whip in the hand of the lightning god whipping fiercely down onto the world of man, and its impetus was shocking and terrifying to the extreme. All the disciples on West Radiance Peak were astounded, and they retreated to safe areas. Even the expression of Wen Huading and the other higher-ups of the sect turned serious as they maintained combat readiness. No matter if it was a cultivator or an earthly immortal, the hearts of everyone would suffer an unparalleled pressure when facing the tribulation of the Heaven Tao, and if one was affected by the tribulation lightning, the consequences would be unimaginable. Swoosh! Amidst this extremely tense and oppressive atmosphere, a golden and bright ray of light suddenly rose from the banks of the sword purification pool on West Radiance Peak, and it charged through the sky. It was like a golden road that was paved between the world of man and the sky, and it erupted with blazing and dazzling light that was extremely striking within the pitch-black tribulation cloud. At the same time, a tall figure that stood on the golden ray of light swiftly arrived in midair. His clothes and long hair fluttered with the wind while his figure remained ramrod straight like a spear, and there was a green-colored wine gourd hanging on his waist. He stood in midair with his hands behind his back, and his entire body was suffused with an aura of simplicity while he revealed an extraordinary and relaxed bearing. Xianxia. Everyone noticed with a single glance that the carefree and unrestrained figure that carried a relaxed expression was exactly Xianxia. But never had all of them imagined that Xianxia would actually not be nervous in the slightest when facing the tribulation lightning that was accumulating madly in the sky above him, and his bearing was relaxed as if he was taking a stroll in his own backyard. Merely this indifferent and unmoving bearing caused all the disciples of the Nine Radiant Sword sect to be filled with admiration. Rumble! In the sky, the sounds of thunder were like the roars of a god. The surging pitch-black tribulation cloud rumbled as it converged together, and its color actually darkened bit by bit and was suffused with a dark azure color. It was even to the extent that the thunderstorm and arcs of lightning that surged endlessly within the tribulation cloud had transformed to carry a faint azure color. They were dazzling and resplendent, and they were suffused with an extremely terrifying aura of tribulation. The azure lightning tribulation, the first level of the heavenly tribulation before one advanced to the earthly immortal realm. As the saying goes, the Grand Tao is like a clear sky that allowed one to rise rapidly. After a cultivator overcame this tribulation, it would be like obtaining a rapid rise, and the cultivator would be able to transform into an earthly immortal. Crack! When the surging tribulation cloud in the sky converged to the limit, an extremely terrifying thunderclap resounded out abruptly, and it shook through the world and resounded throughout the surroundings. It shook everyone on West Radiance Peak to the point their eardrums almost split apart, and a horrified feeling arose in their minds. At the same time, a sharp and thick azure-colored lightning bolt that was in the shape of a tree branch tore fiercely through the tribulation cloud and surged down, and it dyed the entire heavens and the earth in a dazzling azure color. Bang! The first azure tribulation lightning was like a divine chain that came from the Heaven Tao as it struck down at Xianxia, who stood in midair. The heavenly tribulation had begun. When the dark azure-colored tribulation cloud converged to the limit, when Huading and the others knew very well that Xianxia's first heavenly tribulation to advance into the earthly immortal realm was about to descend. There were 9 levels in the earthly immortal realm, and one had to undergo a different heavenly tribulation for every single level. For example, this azure lightning tribulation for the first level was the first test to advance into the earthly immortal realm. The azure lightning tribulation contained the terrifying might of the laws of the Heaven Tao, and it was completely different from the tribulation of wind and fire during the Golden Core realm and the tribulation of rebirth at the rebirth realm. If one was able to overcome this tribulation, true essence would be able to transform into immortal energy, whereas divine sense would transform into immortal perception. If one failed, then one was bound to perish. However, everyone never expected that when the thick and sharp branch-shaped azure lightning bolt tore through the layer of clouds and rumbled as it struck down, Xianxia stood upright in midair and actually didn't move at all. He seemed as if he was dumbstruck, and he stood there like a clay status and utterly showed no signs of intending to resist this tribulation lightning bolt. What does Elder Xianxia intend to do? This was too surprising to everyone. The pupils of the disciples on all over West Radiance Peak suddenly constricted while they revealed expressions of disbelief because this was a heavenly tribulation, a merciless test that came from the heavens. It wasn't just them. Even the hearts of Wenhuiting and all the other higher-ups jerked as they didn't know what Xianxia intended to do. How can he remain indifferent at this critical moment of life and death? Bang! Took a long time to put in writing, but it was actually just a moment. The azure tribulation lightning had already struck down towards him, and the dazzling and resplendent bolt of lightning was suffused with an aura that aroused horror and despair in one's heart as it blasted down onto Xianxia's body with a bang. At this instant, the expressions of most disciples turned pale, and they couldn't bear to look. Only the sect master and the others acutely noticed that when the azure tribulation lightning hadn't touched Xianxia's figure, countless vortexes had appeared on the surface of his entire body, and they revolved madly while actually completely devouring the azure tribulation lightning like a whale taking water in. The Devour Dao insight. Instantly, Wenhuiting and the others had determined the profundities within this, and they were extremely astounded in their hearts. No one had imagined that Xianxia would actually use such a method to forcefully devour the bolt of tribulation lightning. In the past, not a single cultivator dared to imagine something like this. After all, it was a tribulation from the Heaven Dao, and it represented the vast and mighty divine might of the heavens. It was the most brutal and merciless, so who would dare devour the tribulation lightning with their own bodies? But it just so happened that Xianxia had done this, and he was completely unharmed. He seemed relaxed and satisfied as if he'd drunk a cup of wine or tasted a small cup of tea, and he wasn't injured in the slightest. What a freak! All the higher-ups of the 9 Radiant Sword sect revealed strange expressions as they looked at Xianxia's figure in midair, and they seemed as if they were looking at an unfathomable freak. What a unique energy! Xianxia's hair and clothes fluttered as he stood upright in midair, and a strand of dark azure-colored lightning that was thin like the hair of a cow was moving about randomly within his body, and it wanted through his bones and moved through his meridians and apertures. Everywhere it passed, it stimulated the tendons, bones, and skin in his entire body to the point they trembled faintly as if they were pricked by needles. But it didn't hurt, nor was it sufficient to destroy the vital energy within his body, because the terrifying aura of destruction contained within it had been dealt with by him with the Devour Dao insight. Xianxia acutely noticed that after his black hole world absorbed this strand of azure tribulation lightning, it actually started to shrink layer by layer and condense. The black hole world that was originally boundlessly vast, brilliant, divine, and suffused with virtue gold light had actually showed signs of returning to the state of chaos before the world was split open. Rumble! The tribulation cloud in the sky seemed to have been infuriated, and it surged and roiled in the 9 heavens while it condensed another azure tribulation lightning. This tribulation lightning was even more terrifying. It was thick like a pillar and extremely blazing, and it was faintly filled with countless energy of the laws. Even though it hadn't descended, the terrifying aura it emitted caused the heavens and the earth to be cast beneath a shade, sand and rocks flew, and gales whistled. Some disciples with comparatively weak strength were actually knocked out by the imposing aura of this tribulation lightning. At this instant, Xianxia didn't dare be distracted as well. He looked at the sky while the sun and moon alternated within his eyes and the stars circulated, and his entire body erupted with a peerlessly vast blazing glow. When looked at from afar, the tune of the Tao rumbled throughout his body while numerous grand Taos transformed into numerous divine wheels that coiled around his body. He seemed like an emperor in the Tao of talismans and revealed an overbearing aura of supremacy. Bang! The second tribulation lightning struck down like a divine spear of obliteration that was hurled down by the gods of the Heaven Tao, and it was filled with the terrifying aura of destruction, damnation, and annihilation. Come at me! Xianxia laughed in a carefree manner as he suddenly let out a long howl that sounded like the roar of a dragon that shook the surroundings. He didn't retreat but moved forward instead, and he flashed up as if he was walking on air before grabbing with his hand, causing a myriad of profound talisman markings to surge out. Bang! 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 The two collided intensely and erupted with boundless light that dyed the entire heavens and the earth in a blazing and beautiful sparkling glow, and it pierced the eyes of everyone present here to the point they felt a sharp pain and were extremely astounded. At this instant it was like a battle of gods. The entire heavens and earth were filled with terrifying explosions that rumbled to the point it seemed to be on the verge of shattering souls and tearing apart the eardrums of everyone. Isn't the might of this heavenly tribulation too terrifying? When senior brother Lu, who possessed the best natural talent amongst us, underwent his tribulation, the heavenly tribulation that descended wasn't as terrifying as this. Lai Peng spoke with shock. When ordinary cultivators advanced to the earthly immortal realm, the azure lightning tribulation would send down 4 waves of tribulation lightning, whereas those with slightly higher natural talent would face 6 waves of tribulation lightning. On the other hand, peerless figures with unparalleled natural talent would face 9 waves instead. This was merely in terms of amount, and there was a difference in terms of might that varied according to person. According to Lai Peng's knowledge, the azure lightning tribulation chen she was facing at this moment was merely at the 2nd wave, but its might was sufficient to compare with the might of the 4th wave of tribulation lightning that Madman Lu faced all those years ago. Moreover, when Lai Peng faced the azure lightning tribulation all those years ago, only a mere 6 waves had descended, and its might was absolutely unable to compare with what Chun she was facing at this moment. So how could this not shock everyone? It wasn't just Lai Peng. Even when Huiding and the other higher-ups of the sect were extremely shocked as well. Obviously, just like Lai Peng, they discerned how terrifying the tribulation chen she faced was. On the other hand, those disciples of the sect didn't have the slightest mood to pay attention to all of this because their entire bodies had gone stiff from the shock they felt from this terrifying scene, while their Tao hearts showed signs of going out of control. So being able to persist and barely stand was already extremely difficult for them. Rumble. The heavens and the earth were filled with the aura of destruction, while the aura of tribulation emitted by the tribulation cloud grew more and more violent. It seemed like a god that had been completely infuriated and intended to vent its belly full of rage. The terrifying aura it emanated caused the atmosphere that enveloped an area of 500,000 kilometers in the surroundings to be extremely oppressive. Rocks shattered, trees crumbled, and the ground cracked apart while beasts fled in terror. It seemed as if the end of the world was arriving, and it caused everything to be in a state of extraordinary fear. Amidst all of this, Chun Shi's entire body glowed while he met the surging tribulation lightning in combat while barehanded. His figure was like a spear while his spine seemed capable of holding up the heavens and was impossible to be bent. He grasped the world and moved through the surroundings like a war god that seemed to intend to slaughter his way up to the 9 heavens, and he revealed peerless divine might. The 3rd wave of tribulation lightning was destroyed. The 4th wave of tribulation lightning was destroyed. The tribulation lightning with might that grew in might with each wave seemed to be utterly incapable of obstructing his footsteps, and they were shattered and collapsed before him. They tempered his body, steeled his heart, forged his soul, and improved his might. His peerless and all-powerful bearing caused Wen Huiding and the others to be bedazzled while their minds shook without end. He didn't utilize any sources of external strength, nor did he rely on any magic treasures, and merely his own strength was sufficient to resist the heavenly tribulation. How many people in the world could possess such powerful accumulation? All those years ago, Qing Shui had overcome 9 levels of the heavenly tribulation overnight, and it shocked the world and created her brilliant and eternal reputation. But all of this depended on circumstances. When Huiding, who had the fortune of witnessing the scene of Qing Shui overcoming the tribulation, clearly remembered that the might of the tribulation lightning Qing Shui endured when overcoming the azure lightning tribulation was utterly unable to compare with Chun Shi. This didn't mean that Qing Shui was inferior to Chun Shi. After all, she'd overcome the heavenly tribulation of the 1st level of the earth immortal realm until the 9th level of the earthly immortal overnight, and this attainment was something no one could surpass until now. Similarly, even though Chun Shi was overcoming the 1st level of the lightning tribulation now, the might of the tribulation lightning he was facing now was unprecedentedly strong and terrifying, and it was similarly something no one could compare to. Perhaps it was impossible to compare the two of them. When Huading even suspected that if Chun Shi and Qing Shui were to switch places, then perhaps he would similarly be able to overcome 9 levels of the heavenly tribulation overnight. Conversely, if Qing Shui were to face tribulation lightning with a might similar to the tribulation lightning Chun Shi faced, then she was be able to reveal such divine might as well. It's the 8th wave already. Suddenly, a wave of shocked voices jolted when Huading back from his thoughts, and he looked up and saw that the sky was covered densely in azure tribulation lightning that interweaved, converged, and flowed together. They seemed to have formed an ocean made of azure-colored lightning that surged and roared, and it was extremely shocking. On the other hand, Chun Shi stood upright in midair while his imposing aura became even fiercer, and he seemed like a treasure sword hidden deep within an abyss that was emanating divine radiance. Moreover, cold bolts of lightning shot out from his eyes as he blinked. His face was emotionless and fearless, and he seemed to be tranquil and composed. Only his eyes burned with flames that were blazing like lava. That was confidence towards his own strength. It was firmness towards his own path. And it was persistence to break through the shackles of the Heaven Tao and destroy all brambles that blocked his path. No one knew how long Chun Shi had been waiting for this day because his strength had already attained a sort of limit since a long time ago, and if it wasn't for the problem of him being taken to be a variant by the Heaven Tao, he would have easily greeted the tribulation to advance into the earthly immortal realm a year ago. Now, under the protection of the immeasurable virtue technique, he'd finally greeted this moment, so how could he hold back in the slightest? He fully exerted everything he cultivated, the grand obliteration first, the sky control burial sword, the myriad netherwave palm, the all-heaven truth, the creation sword chi. Numerous Tao arts with boundless might that shook the 3 dimensions were easily executed by him to his heart's content. At this moment, the 8th wave of the tribulation lightning was about to descend. Chun Shi's expression was calm as before, and he was like a mountain that remained lofty and unmoving before a storm. It was even to the extent that he had the spare time to look up into the sky and drink the wine in the gourd on his waist, and he revealed an unrestrained, carefree, and peerlessly elegant bearing. O.M. In the next instant and before the tribulation lightning descended, Chun Shi moved first. The talisman armament soared through the sky and slashed out with a strike that swallowed all light in the world and deduced boundless profundities of creation. It seemed to be charging through the sky. While Chun Shi was overcoming the tribulation, at a vast palace in the depths of divine radiance peak, Mei Luoxiao, Xianxia, and all those profligate disciples from the immortal dimension were looking at the sky above West Radiance Peak where tribulation clouds were being formed, and their expressions were gloomy and complicated. Earlier, I thought the stars that appeared in daytime were related to this kid, but unfortunately, Mei Luoxiao frowned while his voice carried a sense of loss that couldn't be eliminated. Even though 2 months had passed, his countenance was still pale while his spirits were low. Obviously, the injury Liang Bing inflicted upon him hadn't healed completely, even though the divine lightning of judgment didn't descend and annihilate him. But at this moment, the might of the tribulation is extremely terrifying, and it's rare even in the immortal dimension. That kid will probably be unable to resist until the end. Yu Zhongxia's gaze was gloomy as she spoke hatefully. Then what if he does get through it? Mei Luoxiao replied with a question. Then, Yu Zhongxiao didn't know what to say. Presently, even if she already hated Chun Shi to the bone, she absolutely didn't dare to make a move against him. The reason was extremely simple. Up until this day, she was still unable to forget that terrifying woman, Liang Bing. She was unable to forget the monstrous power and authority represented by the command token Liang Bing passed to her. And all of this caused her to be fearful to the bone and not dare make the slightest rash move. Looks like you know it as well. Under the current circumstances, we seem to be unable to do anything to that kid. Mei Luoxiao glanced at her and said indifferently, "But, I heard that this kid is like fire and water with the Heavenflow Dao sect, whereas Bing Shirtian is even his #1 enemy. Perhaps he'll be dead before we can make a move. But he's a disciple of our 9 Radiance Sword sect in the end. If we do this, then isn't it slightly—" Yu Zhongxiao spoke stiffly. "You're wrong. We don't have to do anything and just have to watch idly by. Mei Luoxiao directly interrupted her with a wave of his hand, and he sighed with emotion. That's an emissary that holds a decree from the immortal dimension. This honor isn't something that anyone can possess. But this little fellow actually dared to go against Bing Shirtian, and even I slightly admire his courage. Humph. It's only an external avatar. Yu Zhongxiao frowned. You'll know exactly how formidable Bing Shirtian's external avatar is when the time comes. Mei Luoxiao spoke with a serious expression. Even though I'm not willing to admit it, I have to admit that Bing Shirtian is indeed a peerless, remarkable genius. He's thriving and possesses a great reputation even in the immortal dimension, and he drew the attention of numerous great powers. A remarkable talent like him isn't someone that an ordinary person can compare to. Yu Zhongxia was stunned, and then she shook her head instead. It's no use talking so much about this. It's probably impossible for this kid to even overcome the tribulation before him. Eh? Mei Luoxiao's eyes focused as he suddenly looked up to the distant sky. He's taking the initiative to confront the 8th wave of tribulation lightning? Yu Zhongxiao looked over along Mei Luoxiao's gaze, and then she revealed slight surprise. In the distant sky, thunder rumbled while arcs of lightning tore through the sky, and the surging tribulation lightning seemed to have been lit ablaze. It emanated an azure brilliance that blazed like fire and illuminated the world. The 8th wave of tribulation lightning hadn't emerged into the world, yet it had already emanated boundless divine might. Beneath the tribulation cloud, Xianxi's tall figure actually moved up to confront it with the talisman armament in his hand, and he slashed out with a sparkling and vast sword chi that shot into the sky and charged into the 9 heavens. What sort of sword strike was this? It was blazing, dazzling, and coiled with a myriad of talisman markings. The sun and moon alternated within it. A myriad of stars studded it. Yin and yang worked together within it, and the 5 elements circulated within it. It deduced the profundities of boundless secrets and emanated the supreme profundity of creation, and it sees all light from the world. Instantly, everyone in the 9 radiant sword sect was filled with unspeakable shock. A myriad of techniques emerging from a single sword strike. He'd actually displayed the secrets of supreme creation. Creation. This was another extremely terrifying Grand Dao profundity that completely surpassed the numerous Grand Daos and was on equal footing to the Dao insights of eternal, light, darkness, and so on and so forth. Hiss! The sound of cloth being torn apart instantly resounded out in the entire world. Under the astounded gazes of everyone present, Xianxi's sword chi tore apart the surging tribulation cloud into 2. On the other hand, the 8th wave of tribulation lightning contained within the tribulation cloud was even easily slashed into pieces like paper, and it vanished without a trace. The might of a single sword strike was actually so terrifying. At this moment, an area of 500,000 kilometers within the 9 radiant sword sect fell into deathly silence as they were shocked by this scene. Even the dark azure tribulation cloud that surged endlessly in the sky seemed to have fallen into silence, and it stayed motionless while the gales had vanished and the thunder remained silent. Xianxi's future is limitless. When Huiding had an excited expression as he muttered to himself. He was already unable to remember how many times he'd spoken words like this, yet it was only this time that he felt unprecedented shock. Such a figure is bound to command the winds and the clouds and shock the 3 dimensions. How fortunate of my 9 radiant sword sect to possess such a disciple. The other higher-ups of the 9 radiant sword sect had excited expressions and were unable to control their feelings. As for the other disciples, they were shocked speechless, and they were utterly incapable of finding any word to describe how they felt at this moment. They were too shocked. A single sword strike had split apart the tribulation lightning. Since the ancient times until now, was anyone even capable of accomplishing this? Even if someone was, could anyone have done it in such an easy and relaxed manner like Elder Xianxi? Damn it! Why didn't it strike that bastard to death? Mei Qingyuan suddenly started cursing loudly with fury, and his voice carried deep anger and resentment. The other profligate disciples from the immortal dimension were shocked and disgruntled as well. How could this bastard's reserves be so deep and formidable to the point he can defy the heavens? Shut up. Mei Luoxiao suddenly turned around to glance coldly at Mei Qingyuan. You good-for-nothing fellow. I'll be the first to kill you if you dare talk nonsense again. Mei Luoxiao really did hate this junior of his to the extreme. If it wasn't for Mei Qingyuan offending Qian Shi, how could he have possibly been whipped in public by that detestable woman and lose all face? Mei Qingyuan shuddered and felt as if he'd fallen into an icy pit, and he didn't dare say another word. Mei Luoxiao sighed in his heart when he saw this and gnashed his teeth without end because he wished for nothing more than to kill Qian Shi right now as well. But he had to endure it in the end. Little fellow, I'll be waiting for the day you go against Bing Shitian. Mei Luoxiao looked up towards the distant sky while a wisp of a gloomy and cold sheen flashed in the depths of his gaze. The heavens and the earth were deathly silent. After the 8th wave of tribulation lightning was destroyed, the tribulation cloud in the sky suddenly became silent, and it quietly condensed and fused together. In the time of a few breaths, it transformed into a vortex-shaped tribulation cloud that enveloped above West Radiance Peak. It was perfectly silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. Yet everyone couldn't help but feel cold in their hearts when they noticed this scene, and it was like an enormous mountain was pressing down onto their hearts, causing them to be oppressed to the point of being on the verge of suffocating. The expressions of Wen Huading and the others gradually became serious, and they noticed how terrifying it was. The greatest sound is silence. The greatest form is shapeless. When all energy arrived at a limit, they would instead return to a state of extreme tranquility. Everyone knew that the 9th and final wave of tribulation lightning would surely be the most terrifying attack once it emerged into the world. Since the ancient times until now, there had been countless peerless geniuses and extraordinary talents that had died beneath the strike. So, would Qian Shi be able to overcome it? When the gazes of everyone descended onto Qian Shi, they didn't see a trace of nervousness from his expression, and he was still composed, carefree, and indifferent. Perhaps, it's precisely because of his extraordinary cultivation in the Tao heart that allowed him to possess his current accomplishments. Everyone seemed as if they'd comprehended something, and their moods unconsciously became much more relaxed. Even though Wen Huading didn't say anything, but a wisp of admiration slid past the depths of his eyes when he noticed this scene. Because how could he not be shocked when Qian Shi was actually able to affect the changes in the hearts of everyone through his own imposing aura? Right amidst this deathly silent atmosphere, the dark azure tribulation cloud that condensed into a vortex in the sky suddenly shrunk fiercely towards its center, and it condensed a bolt of lightning. It was dark azure in color, deep, condensed, and ordinary, but it emanated an extremely terrifying oppressive aura onto the hearts of all, and it felt as if they would suffer the judgment and punishment of the heavens in the next moment. Moreover, its might was rising with an insane speed, and it caused everything in the world to wail in unison. Hiss! When they saw the appearance of the final bolt of tribulation lightning clearly, Wen Huading and the other higher-ups of the sect couldn't help but gasp while they felt horrified because this tribulation lightning seemed to be too terrifying. Shit! Elders, please make a move swiftly and activate the West Radiance Peak's grand formation. Wen Huading's face went slightly grim as he suddenly shouted towards the sky. Instantly, Elder Lai Peng and the others didn't hesitate in the slightest to make a move. They formed numerous profound seals to activate the grand formation of the sect that enveloped the West Radiance Peak, and it enveloped all the disciples in the surroundings. Is he going to be detected? It shouldn't be like this. Axiu stood alone on a huge rock in the distance. Her jet-black hair fluttered while her gaze that looked towards the final tribulation lightning in the sky actually revealed a rare wisp of seriousness. Bang! Right at this moment, Qian Shi's body suddenly erupted with a myriad of strands of golden glow. He was like a scorching sun that rose into the sky and illuminated the world, and he covered everything in the world with a layer of a gentle and golden sheen. It was even to the extent that a golden lotus platform had appeared beneath his feet, and it was suffused with divine radiance and flickered with a faint glow. Moreover, golden flowers fluttered down from the sky, while a myriad of auspicious qi and light emerged. At this moment, his appearance was solemn and dignified while bathed beneath the dazzling golden brilliance. He seemed like a sage of legend that existed for eternity, and he emanated an aura that calmed the soul and caused the heart to feel tranquil. Heart Energy Secret Technique. Immeasurable Virtue. It was the virtue energy that Xianxia had accumulated during the 1 year he cultivated in the talisman dimension that had appeared at this moment. As the saying goes, doing good on behalf of the heavens was immeasurably virtuous. At this moment, he was like a virtuous sage that emanated a myriad of golden light that illuminated the world. What terrifying virtue energy! At this instant, the bodies of Wenhuiting and all the other higher-ups of the sect stiffened, and they didn't dare believe that Xianxia was actually capable of accumulating such vast and brilliant virtue gold light. Only Axiu suddenly started chuckling as she stroked by Kuei that she embraced in her arms, and she muttered, "Humph! I knew it! That fellow's senior sister came over last year and dealt with all of this for him a long time ago. To think I was anxious for nothing and almost—" No one noticed that a sky-blue jade pendant that seemed like the heart of an ocean had suddenly appeared in her palm, and then it vanished without a sound.